The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Remember this, when you're the greatest fighter in the world today, they got a name for you. They don't call you a great fighter, they call you Chael Sonnen and beat me, if you can.
And after tonight, none of you in this ring will ever again!
You're talking to the Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, kid stealing, woo, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun, and I'm having a hard time holding these alligators down. Woo!
I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
And I have in my cold beer. You have your cold beer? If not, you are fucking jabroni. Wash it down with 1 beer, 2 beers, 3 beers, a shot of whiskey.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Welcome to the FRB Show. I think this is the 4th episode, but I really couldn't tell you. But we have a special guest today. He is the lead writer for BleacherReport.com and also can be seen at times on CNN. His name is Jeremy Botter. What's up, man?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Good, dude. Thanks for taking the time. And just want to dive right in, get your thoughts on the UFC lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've known it was coming for a while. It's kind of one of those worst-kept secrets, and one of the worst-kept secrets in the industry. And when I first heard about it, that probably 18 months ago, from my understanding, I think Pat Miletich was involved or was the one talking about it, and obviously he's not anymore. And I don't know if he was ever actually involved in the suit at that time. If he was one of the people that these law firms had approached. I just knew that they were talking about it at the time and figured it was going to happen eventually. I don't know how seriously I take it, honestly. Like lawyers that I've talked to, I'm no lawyer. I like to pretend like I am, but lawyers that I've talked to don't really give it much of a chance. They say it's a poor case put together, and I've read it. And again, I'm no lawyer, but I've read the whole thing, and it just seems to me that it's kind of flimsy. There's really no such thing in today's society as a monopoly, and if that's kind of what they're going after, then I think they're going to fail miserably. And I've got a lawyer buddy here in Houston. I'm actually here on holiday right now, and he actually works. He's an antitrust lawyer and works on class action lawsuits constantly. And he said there's almost no chance this thing gets certified as a class action lawsuit, which means if that happens, then it breaks up into 3 separate lawsuits for the guys. And it's going to be significantly less damages. And he said there's, I have to take him at his word. He said there's no chance almost that this thing gets certified. So I don't know. I don't know how far it's going to go. And even if it does get certified, man, we're looking at 5 or 6 years of litigation that's going to be really frankly something that doesn't interest me until we get to the point where damages are incurred,
Sure. I mean, I read through it too, and a lot of the allegations just kind of seemed like, they bought companies. Well, I mean, welcome to America. Large companies buy other companies. Google's always buying companies. Facebook's buying companies. And really, the only things that made any sort of sense to me that they were bitching about was the Champions Clause, which extends the fighter's contract. I'm told it extends it only 3 fights, although I've heard some other people say that it's in perpetuity. And then the other thing that I thought was a fair point was likeness rights. I mean, the UFC holds the likeness rights even after death. So if Chuck Liddell's child wouldn't be able to reap the benefits of his likeness.
Yeah, and I've got a problem with that clause. As far as the Champions Clause goes, I mean, I've seen Eddie Alvarez's contract, the first offer that they made him years ago, and I mean, it did extend for 3 fights. But like, again, let's say he was the champion, and it extends for 3 fights, and then he wins his next fight. Well, it extends for 3 more fights. So I guess in a way, it is 3 fights, but also in a way, it is in perpetuity. So like, I don't know. I don't know how much. I mean, I don't know how much that's going to give them trouble in court. I know that the likeness rights, that's troubling. That's always been troubling. We remember the day that Dana fired everybody from AKA, including Cain Velasquez, who was not yet the heavyweight champion, was still considered a prospect. He fired all of them, in one day because of this clause, and they relented. And, Josh Koscheck being the first one that kind of broke away and did his own thing and was like, hey, I'm not with these guys. I'll sign. And then they all kind of caved in. We've seen back 2006, 2007 that we've seen issues with this clause. And if anything does give the UFC trouble out of this whole thing, I think it'll be that.
And from the people, lawyers that I've spoke to, they said that the Champions Clause would never hold up in court. But it's never gotten to the point where they've had to discuss it in court because the UFC usually just tears up the contract. Like John Jones got a new contract with 5 fights left on his deal.
Yeah, and you're looking at, I mean, realistically, in today's modern MMA landscape, do you see any of the UFC champions, coming to the end of their deal without signing a new deal and then going, hey, I want to go to Bellator, let's go to court and challenge this? They're not going to. I mean, at least right now, as things stand, Bellator's making moves. I'm a big fan of Scott Coker and what they're doing, but I don't see any current UFC champion going, hey, I'm going to go to Bellator at this point. They're not going to do that, and so they're never going to challenge it. So it takes guys like Fitch and and Nate Quarry, who I'll save my thoughts on Nate Quarry for another time. But like it takes guys like that who have no chance of getting back to the UFC. Even though John Fitch, I think, is still a pretty good welterweight, despite a poor, run of form lately, there's no chance he's ever going to go back. They cut him because he's boring as hell, and like that's never going to change about John Fitch. So it takes guys like them to actually challenge it, because no champion is actually going to take it to court. That's just not a thing that's ever going to happen. Yeah,
they were really scraping the bottom of the barrel. I mean, to involve Nate Quarry. I mean, I know people in Portland, and I mean I don't think anybody respects that guy. I don't know if it's brain damage or just a very delusional, narcissistic person that nobody takes seriously. And like you said, Fitch has no chance of ever getting back to the UFC. He's pretty much Polaris just shredded his knee, and then Hendricks stole his soul a couple years back. And then Kung Lee, I mean, this guy's ballsy. I wrote that on Twitter. I was like, wow, he came over to the UFC. He's put in all these high-profile situations. He was on Tough China. I mean, probably paid $350,000, $400,000 a fight, and gets juiced to the gills. Everybody knew it because the eye test never fails. The drug test might fail, but the eye test never does. He's obviously guilty, and now he's the biggest victim of it all.
Yeah, and you mentioned the eye test. There are few exceptions to that, Brock Lesnar being one. I mean, I believe that guy's clean. He's just a physical freak. You've got some guys in wrestling who just have those kind of bodies. They're genetically blessed, but they are 1 in 500,000. And, if you look at Kung Lee at 48 or 58 years old, however old he is now, and he goes into this fight with Michael Bisping, and I mean, I'm not accusing him of anything, but dude, like, it's a little suspicious that you look that way when you've never been ripped in the past, and you are older now than you've ever been, and you've been doing movies. Like, how do you find the time to as he put it, find good lighting to take pictures in? Like, I was always a little suspicious. I think most of us are, but I mean, obviously I can't go out and say, this guy's used to the gills, but like, dude, you can look at the guy and go, that's just a little skeptical that you would be that old. It'd be like if Randy Couture came out one day looking like Brock Lesnar. Like, you'd be like, okay, it's a little weird because you went from an old man body, which happens when you become an old man, to looking like an Adonis. Man, it's a little skeptical. My thoughts on Kung Lee is like, dude, he got over. You know, like, whether he did or didn't take it, he looked better than he ever did. He didn't look good in the fight. He lost the fight because of poor drug test handling, because the UFC decided to go with the cheapest option possible when they were cutting corners on these drug tests. You know, he got away with it. Like, why not just get away with it? Why do you have to go out there and act like, you know, you were wronged in such a major fashion that, you know, they besmirch your name? I think you might have done that yourself, Kung. That's kind of the way I feel about it.
Yeah, and just to transition to another guy who's perpetually disgruntled at his employer, Rampage Jackson. And I was talking to somebody yesterday at Bellator, and they said, we have no intention of releasing Rampage. He wants a new contract, but we're not cutting him. It doesn't make any sense because the guy draws viewers, and that's what we're in the business of doing. And then I heard another rumor saying that it's possible that by the time that people hear this, Rampage will be signed with the UFC. So what are you hearing?
I've heard that he has signed a deal with the UFC, and they're going to announce it tonight. And I mean, again, I that's not something that I've verified. That's not something that tonight being Saturday when we're recording this, like I end this show in Brazil, wherever the hell they are in Brazil, like I've heard they're going to announce it, but again, it's unconfirmed, and I don't know entirely how Rampage would get out of his deal with Bellator. I know that Scott Coker, again, big fan of Scott Coker, and if people don't really want to be there, he's not going to force them to be there, but Scott Coker's not entirely in charge. The people at Spike are, and they're in the business of ratings, and they're very smart. That's why I've told people constantly that Spike TV is going to make a play for Brock Lesnar. They're going to make a play for Alberto Del Rio. They're going to make plays for guys who can draw numbers in fights. They're going to spend the money required. So why would they let Rampage Jackson go? I don't know. But again, I'm hearing it from some fairly good sources, not confirmed. Maybe Rampage has in his contract pay-per-view points. And maybe they're not going to be able to do a pay-per-view in the time specified in his contract. So maybe that way. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's people on the UFC side that are pretty confident that he's going to be in the fold, within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the same thing about tonight. It's noon out here in the East on Saturday, and I've heard the same thing that he could be possibly announced as signing with the UFC tonight. But you also mentioned Brock Lesnar, and he's the guy. He's so interesting to talk about. He's just this comic book character that we all talk about. Like ever since he left the UFC, we've been talking about him coming back. I think it's been like 4 years. Do you think he's coming back, or is it just typical Brock just being really smart and not? Usually he plays two sides against each other. Now he's got a third wheel, Viacom, who's got a ton of money, and you've been pretty vocal that you've said point blank, hey, they're making a play for him. It's not if, it's when he hits the free agent market.
Yeah, they're going to make a play for him. For him, that comes from people at very high levels at Spike TV at Viacom. Their response, when I talked to them about it, was, "Why wouldn't we make a play for him?" Like they're trying to build a viable television product. They don't care about pay-per-view. And they, without me even mentioning it, this person who is extremely high at Spike TV said, we would take him and put him against Bobby Lashley on free TV. I mean, that'd be a massive number. Now, do I think Brock is going to go back to fighting? I do. I think he will end up. I actually think he'll end up in Bellator next year. I think come WrestleMania, once WrestleMania ends, I think by this summer Brock Lesnar will be in Bellator. That's just my personal gut feeling from talking to people who know him. You and I both. A lot of people can guess who I'm talking about, but they, I do feel like he will be back and fighting. But again, man, you kind of hinted at it. Brock Lesnar is a really smart dude, and he is a very smart businessman. He really knows how to play people off of each other. Is he playing off each other to get a better deal from the WWE? I don't think so. I think this is the end of his WWE run. He's going to go to WrestleMania. He's going to drop the belt to Roman Reigns. What from there? Where do you go? Like he's already wrestled the top guys in the company. He's put over the young star coming up, who I think is a terrible wrestler. I think it's a terrible decision. But like at that point, what does he have to do? What does he have left to accomplish? I think he's going to make one more run, and I think he's going to go to whoever pays him the highest dollar amount, and I think that'll be Viacom.
I don't know if you had the opportunity to read this week's Observer, but I thought I kind of scanned it. I didn't have a ton of time. But I thought Dave said something about he thought that Brock looked a little smaller and he might be kind of getting back into fight shape rather than, his more like bodybuilding type look. Have you noticed that? Or
he is significantly smaller. Instead of being 320 pounds, he looks like he's probably 300 pounds right now, which is, kind of weird. He starts his camps and then he cuts from, 285, 290 to 265. Obviously Brock Lesnar is going to have to cycle off of whatever he is on right now because there's a difference. I mean, when he's fighting, he's massive. He's still a very, very big man. But when he goes in wrestling, he balloons up, He looks a little bit different. So he's going to have to stop doing whatever gimmicks he's doing to make himself look good on television and get back into fight shape. And I do think he'll do that. I do think you're seeing that, and I do think he will fight before the end of 2015.
Now, the economics of putting Brock Lesnar on free TV is interesting to me because I can't see Brock stepping in a cage for anything less than $2 million a fight. Now, how do you justify that expense with no pay-per-view revenue coming in to offset it?
I think what you do is, if you're Spike TV, you either put it on Spike TV. I mean, you're going to get a massive number, so you're going to be able to sell really good advertisements. And Spike and Viacom have, if there's one thing they've always had, even when Bellator under Bjorn was absolutely terrible. I hated Bellator under Bjorn Rebney, mostly because I hated Bjorn Rebney. But even under them, they had really good sales. They have a very good sales department. And can you imagine a really good sales department selling television spots for a Brock Lesnar fight? I mean, I'm not saying this is going to be like the Super Bowl where you're getting $10 or $20 million or whatever for 15, 20 seconds of television, but you're going to be able to sell several $1 million worth of advertising. I think far more than enough to cover the cost of Brock Lesnar being $2 or $3 million if that's his salary for the fight. I think they'd be able to cover that. More than cover that, actually.
So it's not going to be like the ad rates for Impact Wrestling? Is that what you're saying?
No, I would not think so because and that's the reason that Impact Wrestling is not on Spike TV anymore. Spike TV, they like the fact that Impact brought in, 1 million, 1.2 million every week. You can depend on it, but you can't, to directly quote a vice president from Spike TV, you can't sell ads against it. You just can't. Which is why Impact Wrestling is on something called Destination America, which I've never heard of. I don't know if you have, but I've never heard of it until this. Apparently it's cooking shows and Impact Wrestling, which sounds about right for that promotion.
And
it's not going to be like that.
Another thing that is just another in a comedy of errors, they're going to Friday night, and it's just like, how stupid are you?
Yeah, I mean, I have not watched Impact. Like, I turned it on, like one of those best of shows a couple of weeks ago, just to see who's a star now there. I don't recognize anybody except for Bobby Lashley. Like, I really don't. Like, I don't know what they're doing. They've got Jeff Hardy wearing some gimmick where he doesn't even look like himself. No. But alter ego. Like, I don't understand it. And as bad as the WWE is, and as much as they turn me off from watching them every single week, it seems like it's their mission to drive viewers away instead of bringing them in. TNA is just so much worse.
So much worse. Yeah, you mentioned
so much worse.
You mentioned Lashley because it makes perfect sense for the guy for Lesnar to come in and fight. And to me, at this point, Brock's 30. He's going to be 38 by the time he fights. He goes to the UFC. I mean, there's a decent chance even a Brendan Schaub, beats him up pretty bad. Now, he goes to Bellator. He's got some guys with some name value that he could probably beat pretty easily, Lashley being one of them, Czech Congo. There's a Russian guy that they have, and maybe a couple others that I'm forgetting. And then you could possibly throw him in there against Tito or throw him in there against Rampage at heavyweight if he's going to still be there. So do you see Brock weighing the competition factor when making his decision?
I don't think so. I think Brock weighs the dollar. That's as we've seen with Brock Lesnar, he's going to go whoever pays him the most. I think if Viacom offered him $1 more than the UFC, he would go there. I don't think he cares. Like, Dana's bullshit about Brock wants to fight the best in the world. No, Brock wants to get paid the most in the world. That's what Brock wants, and anything else is utter complete bullshit, and we all know that. As far as me personally, as somebody who enjoys a Brock Lesnar fight just because of all the hoopla that goes along with it. I don't like interviewing the man. I don't know if I've ever told you the story about when he was getting ready to fight Shane Carwin, and we were having a media day, and he had been talking about how he didn't want to be associated with the WWE, and yet he came in and to the media center, and there was a cardboard stand-up of Shane, and he kicked it over, and then he kind of turned around and essentially gave us like his pro wrestling look.
Yeah.
And so my first question was, if you don't want to be associated with the WWE, why do you do stuff like this? And his face turned red, Brian. I'm not lying to you, dude. His face turned red. I thought he was going to kill me. I was utterly terrified of this man at that point. Like, despite how painful it is interviewing him, I still enjoy everything that goes along with it because he has such a presence. I would like to see him go to Bellator because I think competition is good. I think competition is good for the UFC. I think it's good for Bellator. You and I grew up and we remember the Monday Night Wars. We lived that stuff and how entertaining it was. And November 15th, when Bellator in San Diego was going head-to-head with the UFC's pay-per-view, featuring a heavyweight title fight. And Bellator won the night. They did far more viewers in the pay-per-view, of course, which we expected, but, they also had people talking about them. People weren't talking about the UFC event, and that was a good event. People were talking about Bellator. I want to see that. I also wouldn't mind like a little heavyweight tournament, like, Bobby Lashley against James Thompson, Bobby Lashley against Brock Lesnar, Lesnar against Thompson. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think it's interesting. I think it's different, and competition is good, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm just thinking maybe they could bring back Kimbo. But
yeah, like, why not? I mean, why not? Why not bring back Kimbo? Bring in Fedor. Do Fedor and Brock. I mean, like, God, can you imagine, if Dana spent all that time trying to get Brock Lesnar and Fedor at Cowboy Stadium, and then Scott Coker books it on free TV for Spike? Can you imagine that? It'd be great.
But that's one guy. I don't trust any of these guys that retire in this sport. That's one guy that actually, all right, he is retired. I believe him.
Yeah, I do too. He's always been different, but I mean, I would still not mind seeing it. Even though both guys are old, and at this point, Brock might kill Fedor. Who knows? Or Fedor might kill Brock. You never really know. But it's just that kind of thing. Like, you and I are sitting here talking about, well, what if? That's the kind of stuff that competition breeds. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, and really, we're talking about characters here. We're talking about a guy who's going to be 38 years old and got his ass handed to him by Overeem and Cain Velasquez. We're talking about a guy who might not even be in the top 10 in the world. And if he came back, he's the biggest name in the game.
By far, him and CM Punk, who is 0-0, would be the two biggest stars in the UFC. After all these years spent building up John Jones and Ronda Rousey and Cain Velasquez, and two professional wrestlers come in, one who has never had a fight ever, and the other one who got smoked in his last couple of fights, and they would be the biggest stars in the game.
I mean, I love the idea of CM Punk coming to the UFC, and when I was first tipped off about it about 2 weeks before it actually happened, the source was so solid. I was like, there's got to be something to this. This source does not bullshit me. But the other side of me is saying, like, no, that's insane. Because I've talked to guys who've been in the room with him. He's not even good at jiu-jitsu. And that's his strong point. Like, he's very mediocre at jiu-jitsu. And and then you have to wrestle and you have to know how to box and all these things. And I'm like, there's just no way. But I mean, I love the idea because I love a great storyline, and this might even turn into an incredible train wreck. But do you think Dana's, or not like he's making the decisions, more like the Fertittas, do you think they'll put him in there with a guy that's 1-0, 2-0, or do they hot shot it and put him in there against a real fighter, try to get 1 million buys, and then he just splits after he gets his ass kicked?
No, I don't think so. I think what you're going to see, and it's interesting. You mentioned that before found out about it. You told me that you had heard that this was happening, and I was like, come on, like that's not happening. And then sure enough, I made some calls, and like, yeah, they were talking, and I was like, this is the most surprising thing in the world, and people are going to be so mad if it actually happens. But it's also the least surprising thing in the world because the UFC's hurting. They need stars. They need James Toney. They need people like that. And if they weren't, CM Punk would never be signed. Like, this is a product. For me, CM Punk signing with the UFC is the storyline of 2014, the biggest storyline of 2014, because it indicates so much more than just CM Punk signing with the UFC. It indicates how much trouble they are in, how much money they're losing. It's a major, major deal just because it tells you so much more about the state of the company, the state of mixed martial arts as a whole right now. I think that as far as him actually coming in, I think they're going to have him fight somebody who's maybe 0-0, 1-0, 1-0, 2-0. And honestly, I think whoever he fights is going to be fairly terrible, and I think he will win. A lot of people disagree with me. I've talked to people who have rolled with him, and they say he's a lot better than people think he is. Some people say he's average. Just from watching videos of him with the Gracies, he looks like he knows what he's doing. But in a real fight and not just demonstrating moves with your friends, like, I don't know how it's gonna play out. He looks like he moves well on the ground. And I do believe, you know enough about him to know that this is a guy who was so dedicated to wrestling and so dedicated to being the best and so dedicated to going to WrestleMania and being in the main event of WrestleMania that he sacrificed so much. He hurt himself. He hurt every night. And this is an era where guys don't really do that anymore. They take time off. Guys really don't hurt the way that they did in the 80s and 90s. This guy still does because he was so dedicated, wanted to be the best. And a lot of people talk about the straight edge, the drug-free, the drug-free, alcohol-free thing. Like, I think that shows a lot about the man. I think it shows that when he decides he wants to do something, he puts everything he has into it. Am I saying he could go in and beat Michael Bisping? Am I saying he could go in and beat one of the top 10 middleweights in the world? No, but I do think, and I really do believe this, Brian, I think he's going to go in there, and I think he's going to surprise a lot of people with how good he is when he actually does fight. I'm not saying he's going to be great, but I'm saying that he will surprise people. I think he'll look a lot better than, let's say, you or me going in and trying to fight somebody in the octagon.
Yeah, well, that's not much of a measuring stick, but
that's not. I would fall over. I've made this joke before, but if somebody kneed me in the stomach, I would probably throw up on them and then start crying. I just can't do that. I've seen some horrible things in my life, but I just can't take being hit and punched and stuff. So yeah, I think he's going to look good. I think he'll probably win a couple of fights. And, there's almost nobody in the world that agrees with me, but I really do think he's going to surprise people.
Now, you mentioned UFC's financial situation, and I don't know if the people that are listening, how much they know about it, but basically the UFC has about $500 million in loans that are coming due in 2015, and they're not going to repay all of them in 2015. It's going to get restructured, but the terms of that restructuring is important. The people that own that debt has to see some kind of change in their revenue trends, the pay-per-view buys, the merchandise, the live event. So you're like in agreement with me that signing CM Punk, going after Gina Carano, these are all signs that the UFC's goal has really changed from trying to find out who the best fighters in the world are to more of an entertainment product.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think it always has been that. I just think that they try to sell themselves as something they're not. They try to set themselves apart from WWE. They try to pretend like they don't follow the professional wrestling promotional model when we all know anybody with half a brain, and that includes other media who think that I'm wrong, like they do. They are. I've always said it. They are professional wrestling with real fights. That's the way it always has been. They kind of dialed it back the past few years because they were doing good financially. They didn't have to go out and sign James Toney or book freak show fights. But look, man, people like freak show fights. Look at Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonnar. Look how many people tuned into that fight. I had friends who have not watched the UFC since like UFC 105 who were tuned into that fight because they knew who they were. They didn't care that they were old and terrible and over the hill. They didn't care that Stephan Bonner's never been a good fighter and has been living off one terrible barroom brawl that he had with Forrest Griffin. They don't care about that stuff, man. They know that these people are names. They know that these two guys didn't like each other. They know that a guy came in the cage wearing two professional wrestling masks and took them off in the most ridiculous storyline we've ever seen. I have friends who have not watched fights in years who were excited about this fight. And so I think the UFC took a look at that and they went, Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonnar just drew this massive number on Spike TV. We probably need to start doing that again if we want to make money and not go out of business.
Sure. Yeah. And from a very light thing to a more serious thing, for you personally, you kind of have an interesting background, and I did a little bit of research on you, and there was some stuff on like even CBS News about your time as a medic in the Army. Do I have that right?
Yeah, you do. I went. I joined the Army after 9/11 because I wanted to serve my country, and I don't know why, because I've never been big on guns or war or anything of that nature, but I just felt like I needed to, something I needed to do. And so I joined the Army, got stationed with the 4th Infantry Division at Fort Hood, and immediately went to Iraq for the war. I was there for the actual war. The push into Tikrit, we helped take Tikrit, and we're stationed there for 16 months. And I was the CBS News thing was interesting because in 1999, I discovered essentially what was blogging. Like, it hadn't been called blogging yet. And so I started writing. I started doing, because I've always liked to write, obviously. It's what I do for a living now. Always enjoyed writing. So I started writing about my experiences, and I kept doing it when I got to Iraq. Anyway, long story short, I was on the mission that captured Saddam Hussein. Man, I was 50 feet away from the hole when the Delta Force guys pulled him out. And I saw pictures that I took through my night vision goggles. I probably should have said that now because the Army will probably get mad at me.
Yeah, now you're going to get me in trouble. Now the CIA is going to be after me.
I've got pictures, man. Like, they always credited to this day, my division is still credited with getting him and pulling him out of the hole. It was not us. I will tell you that right now. It was Delta Force guys. These dudes who came out of a helicopter with giant beards who looked like Iraqi citizens, but they're all white people from America, came in, pulled him, threw him in a vehicle, and they took off. And so I wrote about it. Nobody was doing this at the time. Nobody was writing about their experiences from war, and I was doing it mostly so my family back home could keep track. And, I would have 5 or 6 readers a day because it was my family. So after I wrote about this mission, to rewind a little bit, we got back from the mission. We got back to our base, and I went to the internet cafe because we had these tents where we could use the computer. We had nothing, man. I was sleeping in a bug net in the sand. We had 1 bottle of water a day. It was 140 degrees outside. So I get back to go use the internet, and I'm like, man, I can't wait to tell my family about this. And they had locked down the internet cafe because they wanted to wait until President Bush was able to make the announcement that they had captured him the next day. So anyway, after the capture, I wrote about it, and I woke up one morning and I looked at my stats, and I had like 700,000 readers in one night. And I was like, oh no. So CBS News had picked it up and had published a link to it. And then they started getting calls from Dan Rather's show saying that they wanted to interview me. And so then I actually got in trouble because they weren't used to people writing about operational things that violated operational security, things like that. I got in a little bit of trouble, but it was all washed over when they actually came out to our base in Iraq to interview me about writing and about the mission and all that stuff. So yeah, I had a little bit of fame back then. That's kind of when it all first started. And now I'm just a fame hog.
You're in the attention whore business. You get people to read your stuff. But so that was called Operation Red Dawn. Yeah. To go after Saddam.
Yep.
And your role as a medic, you became a medic because you had a background as like an EMT or something, or how do you become a medic?
Well, actually, I walked into an Army recruiting station and asked them what jobs they had available. And there was infantry, there was medic, which was 91 Whiskey is the code name for that. And then they also had petroleum specialist, which is somebody who pumps gas. And I'm like, well, out of those 3 things, medic sounds like it's probably the best because I'm not retarded. I don't need to go out there and I'm not going to be pumping gas. And infantry sounds like something that dumb people do. And so I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and do the one that requires a little bit of intelligence that actually gives me a little bit of good schooling. So I picked that one. I went to basic training, and then I got stationed at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, which is the best military base in the world because the ratio of women to men is like 70-30. It's fantastic. You can't beat it. So
good, huh?
I went to school there, then the rest was history.
Now, you mentioned you got in a little bit of trouble. Like, what is it? How do you get called into a tent and, like, you know, with the commanding officer, and you're just like there saying, "Oh God, please don't do anything too bad." So I in the middle of the night, actually, I get woken up, and I'm thinking that I'm going to have to go on a mission, and they're like, "Hey, the CO wants to see you." So the CO was our captain. So I go down, I get dressed, and I go down, and I get in his tent. I'm standing at attention, and he starts yelling at me. And then the commanding general of the 4th Infantry Division, who at the time was Raymond Odierno, who is currently the Army Chief of Staff. He's a 4-star general, works in Washington, D.C., with President Obama. So he was my commanding general at the time, and he came in, and he starts yelling. And, dude, if you are a specialist, I was an E4 at the time, which is very lowly. It's above private, but not by much. If you're getting yelled at, if you even talk to a general, you've probably done something really wrong. But it wasn't that I'd really done anything wrong. They just didn't know what it was yet. You know, nobody was really blogging. Nobody even knew what it was. Like, Evan Williams, the guy that created Blogger, had just started it and sold it to Google, and I was using the platform to actually write. And then, funnily enough, he actually created Twitter. So that guy's 2 for 2 in life. I can't even seem to go 1 for 1 with things that I create, and this guy's 2 for 2 with, you know, these world-beating creations. But yeah, I got called in, I got yelled at for a while. They told me that anything that I wrote from that point forward had to be vetted by our public relations team. So that was when I first started working with PR people back then. So I guess you could say it was a good experience. Well, that kind of sounds like some of the people that cover the UFC. It has to be read over first. But
yeah, some people. Not me, dude. You know me, man. Like I used to be that guy. I used to work for an outlet where we were partners with the UFC, and I will never do that again because nowadays I can say whatever the hell I want, and you know, like if they get mad, they get mad, but it's not going to affect my job.
That was the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit. Bleacher Report, since the Turner Sports acquiring them, has kind of transitioned in the marketplace as kind of, you know, it didn't have a great reputation before. It was just, you know, fans or something, you know, with no sources writing these articles with slideshows. And now it's morphed into this, you know, really serious media outlet. What do you think of the kind of the development or the maturity of Bleacher Report?
It had to happen, dude. I mean, when I first discovered Bleacher Report, probably 2009, I think it was terrible. Anybody could go in there and write whatever they wanted. Like, you could just make stuff up and put it up. You know, they had no credibility for the longest time, and you know, and they wrote terrible slideshows and just kind of tried to game the system to get traffic. But yeah, about a year and a half ago, I mean, I'll be starting my 4th year next year. My next contract will be my 4th one. And it really has changed even since the time that I've been there, since they hired me full-time, since they hired Jonathan Snowden full-time. It's changed. Like, they've hired guys like Howard Beck, who used to work for the New York Times. He's like our NBA writer. Rick Bucher, who covered the Golden State Warriors. You know, like, they hired him to cover the Warriors for us. They're really transitioning from a open source, crowdsourced, to use the buzzword, crowdsourced thing into like more of a traditional, you know, sports outlet. And, you know, we still get all the jokers who think they're hilarious who talk about slideshows. Like, yeah, haha, I haven't heard that for the last 5 years. Like, you're original and totally hilarious, let me tell you. But, like, it really has changed. The culture's changed. We have guys, I mean, one of my main editors who I work with on my longer features used to be a features editor for the New York Times, or bringing in very solid writers with very good sources. I mean, I'm actually not allowed to report news anymore. It's why I kind of break stuff on Twitter when I do it, because they have to have on the record, I'm required to have on the record sources if I want to break news. Now, Brian, as somebody who breaks news regularly, you know how difficult it is to get people to say stuff on the record in mixed martial arts. Well, so I just gave up. I just finally stopped doing it.
I mean, if I had to say, you know, it's on the record and I had to provide a name, I don't think anyone would ever talk to me again.
That's the thing. Like they're like, we need people on the record, and I'm like, I can't. I can give you background people, like, but they're nobody in this sport. None of my sources are going to be like, yeah, tell them that I said that. Like it's too small. Nobody's going to do it. I just don't do it.
I have people that I've known for years that are like, Brian, keep my name out of it.
Yeah, everybody's terrified of the UFC, so nobody wants their name on anything because they know how difficult. I mean, you and I have a mutual friend who was a manager of some very big, very, very, very big fighters and champions and past champions, and like he kind of had a row with Dana White recently, and I mean, that's what people want to avoid. People don't want to get on that guy's bad side, so nobody will go on the record, so I just don't report news anymore. And all that to say that shows you how far Bleacher Report has come from anybody who could write whatever the shit they want to and put it up with no sources and just rumors and stuff to having to have on-the-record sources in order to report stuff. That shows you how far it's come.
Yeah, and you mentioned the features that you've been working on, and I know you got one cooking with Daniel Cormier. So when is that going to come out? Like a couple days before UFC 182?
Yeah, so it's currently scheduled. I finished it yesterday. It is going to end up being about 6,000 words. It's the longest feature I've written so far in my career. It comes out on the 30th, scheduled to come out on the 30th right now. And I've been working on it for probably 4 months. I've been to San Jose, spent time with Daniel. I have about 6 hours of interviews with him. I've talked to John Smith, the coach at Oklahoma State. I've talked to all of his family members. I've talked to everybody at AKA who's ever been associated with him. And I think what I've been able to do is really write the definitive Daniel Cormier story. It's not about John Jones and how they don't like each other. It's about his life and some of the horrific things that he has experienced that, some people know about, but that he's never really talked about in depth. And I think I'm bringing you that. I think a lot of people will like it if you can make it through it. It is about 17 to 20 Word document pages at this point. So it is quite the lengthy read, but if you're interested in the man at all, the man behind the fighting, I think you're going to like it.
Yeah, I mean, he's got an interesting story, and I mean, it's some of the things are not secrets, but I won't say specifically, to kind of ruin the thunder of the article, but he had to deal with some seeing a horrific event when he was 7 or 8 years old to when he was in his, I guess he would be maybe mid-20s with his daughter.
Yeah.
And
yeah. You're actually going to, and the thing is people know about his daughter, people know she died, but you're actually going to hear the details. You're going to hear where he was, who he was with when he got the call from the Texas Highway Patrol telling him about the accident. You're going to hear about, you're going to read about what happened immediately afterwards and, and what kind of place he went into. It was not good for a while for him. And then you're going to actually find out who pulled him out. I think there's going to be a lot of surprising things in that. It was a very difficult story to listen to, very difficult to write. And at the end, I talked to him yesterday and he said, I hope you do me justice. And because, he and I, it's no secret, he and I have kind of a friendship that, we've gone back a few years, and that's kind of why he agreed to do this, because he knew that I would treat him with respect. He knew I would treat the story with respect. And I think it comes out in the story. I'm pretty proud of it, and I hope everybody likes it.
Yeah, so what were some of your other major features? Like, did you have one on Misha Tate, I remember?
I did, yeah. I did one on Misha Tate it came out last Christmas, actually, almost a year ago. And that was really my first long-form feature, because that's another thing Bleacher Report has done. They used to want 500 to 700 words of just straight opinion, and now they're letting guys like me who can do it, or at least I think I can, I like to think I can, do long-form stories, because people are wanting to read. It's weird, Brian, like, people are wanting to read longer stories on mobile devices, and that doesn't make sense, but like that's what the stats show. People are reading longer material on their phones and on their iPads.
Kind of defies logic, right?
It really does, but I guess like when they're standing in line or when they're taking a shit or whatever, like people are reading stuff on their phone, and so they're letting me, they're starting to let me go and do these longer stories. And yeah, I did a story on Misha last year that was about 5,000 words and kind of detailed, her childhood and her upbringing and how she met Caraway, and they have a pretty interesting story. And then I went and I spent a couple of days with John Jones, and I did one before his fight with Glover Teixeira. And that one was less about telling his story than just about describing, what an everyday every day is light for John Jones. And I learned a lot of things during that trip that I was not aware of, like the fact that he is a gun enthusiast. I had no idea. Loves guns. Like, we went to 2 different gun stores in one day. And unfortunately I had to spend a full 24 hours with Malky Kawa, but like, the story still ended up being pretty good, even though Malky kept bugging me to put him in it. I just wouldn't do it.
Yeah. How many times did he say, do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah. You understand where I'm coming from? Or, hey, can you write about that? That just like, I'll never forget. He had this moment where John ordered the new scope for one of his guns or one of his rifles, and Malky negotiated shipping and handling. Dude, no lie, 10 minutes. Malky spent 10 minutes negotiating shipping and handling down from $15 to $0 for a multi-millionaire world fighting champion, just because he likes to negotiate. And then he was like, "Hey, you gonna write about that?" Like, that was 24 hours with Malky Kawa. Just wanted the story to be about himself and how awesome he is.
Yeah, he's going into the NFL now. It seems like he's not as involved. He's still got his MMA company, but he's got his brother Abe, who's handling a lot of the day-to-day things. So I think we might be hearing about him with this upcoming draft.
Yeah, I think you're going to hear about him too. And, all jokes aside, Malky and I like Malky a lot. He's been very good to me. We kind of have this kayfabe gimmick going on, like on Twitter, where we pretend we don't like each other, but I actually like him a lot. He's been very good. I think he is a very good manager, very good at what he does.
Yeah, and it speaks a lot to him as an agent. I think he's very good, and I've told guys, I would sign with him. And they asked me because they said, "Well, you kind of know him," and I said, "Yeah, I would sign with him if I was a fighter, or if I had a son that was a fighter." But he has a really special relationship with John, and it's kind of interesting because you're really, these days you're hearing about, Chris Weidman breaking up with his manager. You're hearing the thing about Ronda Rousey and Darren Harvey, and John and Malky are, seem their relationship, their business relationship, personal, seems to be the same as it was 4 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that's because when you're one of Malky's guys, I can't speak for his lower level guys, but when you're one of his guys, he is really in your corner. Whereas I have managers who talk to me about their clients and just talk shit about them behind their back. It's like Malky doesn't do that. Like, if he's in your corner, he's really in your corner. And again, like, I make a joke about the negotiating, the shipping and handling from $15 to $0, but that's what the guy does, man. Like, he tries to save money. He tries to make you money. The guy loves the art of the deal, and he's actually he's talked me into stuff before. I don't know if he's done it to you, but he's talked me into stuff before. He's really good at it, man, and he's in John's corner. And like, you can say what you want about John and about, like the public image that he tries to portray, and how all of us, you and I probably are not alone in saying that I would love to see John go out there and be the heel and to be the guy that he can be, just to make more money, to make him money, to make Malky money, to make things entertaining. But like, Malky, no matter what John decides, man, Malky's in his corner, and I've seen it. And that's one of the good things about it, man.
Yeah, for sure. I want to ask you about one other guy that's because I think we've touched upon all the guys that moved the needle, so to speak, like Brock and John Jones and CM Punk. How about the Irishman, Conor McGregor? And give me your general thoughts on him, and then when is this fight with Aldo going to happen?
I'll say two things. I think Conor McGregor is fantastic. I have been a vocal supporter of his, even when everybody in the world was hating him, hating the fact that he was being pushed so hard, hating the fact that he's hanging out with Dana and the Fertitas. I think he is good for the sport. He's got a good look. He's much better at fighting than people give him credit for. He knows what he's doing. I've had some very good conversations with Conor McGregor. That said, he is a little sensitive, because I did say on the night of the Aldo and Mendez fight that both of them would beat him, and then he blocked me on Twitter, and still has not unblocked me since then. So, like, he's a little sensitive. He needs to understand that if he's playing the game, he's going to get comments like that. But I think he's great. Now, that said, do I think he beat beats Jose Aldo? No. Do I think he beats Chad Mendez? No. Probably not even Frankie Edgar. But it doesn't matter. I was talking to Dave Meltzer about this, and we're in agreement, man. The guy, he doesn't even have to win every fight. If he wins 2 out of every 3 fights, he's going to be one of the biggest stars they have for years to come. Doesn't have to win a championship, man. Some people don't have to win a championship. He's got it, man. He's got charisma, and he's probably the best promo guy in wrestling or in UFC at this point. Because the stuff, I have great respect for what Chael Sonnen can do. But Chael, a lot of the times, you can tell that the stuff he said he's been working on it. With Conor, I feel like he just says stuff off the top of his head, and it works. I think he's probably the best promo guy in the business right now. As far as when he fights Aldo, I think you're going to see it this summer, provided he beats Dennis Siver. And, Brian, let's be real. If he doesn't beat Dennis Siver, he should probably go to Bellator or something. Like, he should probably find, because Dennis Siver is a match made in heaven for Conor McGregor. If he beats him, I think you're going to see, I think they have a reserve date, Croke Park in Ireland in May. I don't know the exact date, but I think they have the stadium held, and I can't imagine it's for anything other than McGregor versus Aldo.
Yeah, it couldn't be. And speaking of Aldo, he did a Q&A yesterday, I think for the event that's tonight, and he said something like, and I don't know if something was lost in translation, although he has been bitching about pay. He said fighters practically pay to fight. I mean, this guy's. I thought he backed off a little bit, but it seems like he's still really upset about his pay.
Yeah, I mean, I want to know what he spends his money on. Like, Brazilian hookers must be much more expensive than American hookers or something. I'm not saying that Jose Aldo goes out and gets hookers, but like the cost of living in Brazil is not that great. I mean, I don't know what Aldo, the top of my head, I can't tell you what he made, but like when I saw those comments, I was like, wait, didn't you make like $200,000 in your last fight? And like, maybe if you fought more than once every 3 years, you'd be okay, and you wouldn't have to pay to fight, as you say. Maybe if you trained a little bit less with a little bit less intensity. Down at Nova and Yao, they go hard, like real fights all the time. Maybe if you dialed it back a little bit, and didn't have the body of a 40-year-old person when you're still in your 20s, like maybe you would make more money. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, I think the other thing with Aldo is, when he got dealed in on the pay-per-view business kind of took a dive. So in some of those contracts, you gotta, to get a piece of the pay-per-view, it's got to hit 200 units or 250 units, and maybe the ones he's doing are doing $175. So he's just basically fighting for his base 120 and 120, and maybe he's hearing about these other guys with the 7-figure paydays, and maybe that's what he's upset about.
Well, maybe he should learn from Conor McGregor then, right? I mean, maybe he should be that guy. Maybe he should go say crazy stuff like this. Maybe he should talk shit about his opponents. I mean, dude, if Conor McGregor wins the championship, I'm not saying he's going to, but man, if he beats Aldo, you're not going to see him be all, muted and talk about he'll fight whoever the UFC puts in front of him. You're going to see him call people out, and he's going to create interest in fight because he knows that if he creates interest in his fight, he knows that that's how you make money. You don't make money off your base salary. The guys that make the money are the guys that get it. They understand what you and I understand, which is that this is about so much more than just sports. It always has been. It's the guys who just treat it like sports and how they say it's not their job. Dude, Joe Rogan asks the question every single post-fight interview, who do you want to fight next? I'll fight whoever the UFC puts in front of me. That's the prevailing answer we get because so many people are dumb and they don't get it. They ask that question for a reason. They want you to make their job easier. Joe Silva has told me directly that they asked the question because he wants his job to be made easier. Aldo can be that guy. He doesn't speak good enough English to probably be to get as over as somebody like a Conor McGregor here. But like even in translation, like he could still make it work. You don't have to be the champion who's quiet and who says they'll fight whoever you want. And I think that may be why now he's saying that he wants Conor McGregor next. I mean, I'm sure you saw that. It was at the same Q&A. He wants to fight Conor McGregor now. Maybe it's because he gets it. Maybe because he goes, well, this guy's doing something right. Maybe I should start doing it too. And then I can make enough money where I don't have to pay to fight or whatever this nonsense is that he said.
Yeah, and he doesn't even need to be that clever. I mean, he just needs to give us something, something in English to make us care about him because – I mean, the guy's been champion. I think 2009 he won the WEC, which is basically the UFC 45 belt. So it's, what are we going on, 2015?
Yeah, 6 years.
The guy, he should be one of the biggest stars. He's been on a ton of pay-per-views. He was on that card with GSP and Shields that drew 55,000 at Skydome. I mean, this guy should be a much bigger deal. Just learn a couple lines in English and say a couple key things. And I think he'd be he's not going to be a huge star because he's still a small guy, but he'd be a lot better off than where he is right now.
I mean, I hate to keep beating the Conor McGregor horse, but like Conor McGregor is 145 pounds, and I think he is going to be a huge star. And so that proves that now perhaps maybe flyweights and women's strawweights is a different story, but I think 45, 35, you can be a big star as long as you know what you're doing. And I think so many guys are just so hesitant to do it because they don't want to be seen as rocking the boat, or they don't want to be seen as, related to pro wrestling. But man, that's how you make money. Look at the guys who make money. Look at Chael Sonnen. Look what he was able to do. Like,
yeah,
you know him better than anybody almost. Like, look what he was able to do and apply that to your own career. You don't have to be Chael Sonnen. I don't want everybody to be a superstar Billy Graham or a Chael Sonnen or even a Conor McGregor, but like, just be a little bit interesting. Make things interesting. John Jones right now is more interesting than he's ever been because of that superb promo that they have with EC where they use the footage off the air. I know you've seen that. I've probably seen it 150 times. Yeah. John is more interesting right now because that was him being him. And like, you may hate him for it, but you want to see him get beat, and you'll pay to do it. Just make yourself more interesting.
Yeah, John he needs to be John. If he was just going to be John, I think he'd be a much bigger star. I think sometimes he tries to tailor his message to what he thinks people want to hear, but when he's just John and just lets loose, he just has this natural arrogance. I don't mean that as a criticism. If I was the toughest guy in the world and defended my belt 6 times and beat up all these guys easily, I'd be pretty arrogant too.
He is the best fighter the world. He is the best fighter the world has ever seen. I think he's far better than Anderson Silva. Look at the level of competition he's faced. And I'm just like you, dude. If I were John Jones, my family would disown me. They would hate my guts because I would constantly act like the biggest jerk ever. I'm not saying that he needs to go out and be Floyd Mayweather and throw hundreds of dollar bills in the air and beat women and stuff like that. What I'm saying is that he just needs to be the guy that he was on that promo where he was needling Cormier, just kind of ribbing him, poking him, the best line ever, they bleep it out, but when he said, "Hey, pussy, are you still there?" Like that, dude, if he does stuff like that all the time, people will hate him, and that should be fine. He has such a desire to be loved, and that is never going to happen because people can see that he actually is arrogant and he's trying to put on a show for people. I think John needs to embrace the dark side. I think he needs to be that guy all the time, and I think you will see him. Dude, if he became that guy, easily the biggest star in the sport by a wide margin, and I don't think it would even be close.
Yeah, I agree with you. He could be, our Michael Jordan that we're telling our kids about, in 15 or 20 years. But another guy that seems to be getting it more is Chris Weidman. And I don't know if you saw the picture that he put up. I don't know if it was photoshopped or he was actually down in Boca, but right in front of the Jocko Hybrid Training Center, he took a picture and then basically said that he had just finished up training there, which is Vitor's camp.
I didn't see that. That's pretty funny, though.
Yeah, and I saw it because the Black Zillion's owner, Glenn Robinson, actually sent a tweet to Weidman saying, why are you disrespecting our gym like that? Like he was saying that I don't know if Glenn was being tongue in cheek or if it was a shoot that he was insulted that Chris would insinuate that Jocko or Black Zillions would turn on Vitor.
That's pretty funny. Or maybe a third option is maybe that Glenn is working on his promotional chops since he's going to be the star of the next Ultimate Fighter along with Dan Lambert. Maybe he's getting himself ready for that American Top Team versus Black Zillion show that nobody absolutely nobody is going to watch next year.
But yeah, and I asked Glenn that, and I said, "Are you prepared to be a reality TV star?" And he kind of downplayed it, and I was like, "Are you going to get in there at the end? Are you and Dan gonna settle it in the ring?" And unfortunately, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, also fortunately, because nobody really needs to see that. We talk about CM Punk, but the idea of Glenn Robinson and Dan Lambert fighting just sounds horrible. But yeah, I mean, they're already down there filming in Florida. Like, I don't know why they haven't announced it yet. They've been filming for several weeks, so I'm not sure what the holdup is. But yeah, maybe that's what Glenn's doing. Maybe he's working on his character development a little bit.
Right. And just so the listeners know, like, it's not going to be like the Black Zillions that you know versus ATT guys that you know by name. It's 10 no names versus 10 no names.
Yeah, it's dudes you've never heard of. You'll see like cameos by Rashad Evans and people like that. But and I mean, who knows? If it's American Top Team, dude, the thing that maybe the reason they're holding off is because CM Punk, maybe he goes and trains at American Top Team. Maybe he's in the background on this show. Maybe that is the drawing card for this show. Like, hey, tune in next week where maybe CM Punk will be training in the background. Maybe that's why they're doing it.
Yeah, I could see that. I think Punk ends up with Duke Rufus.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Then he'll get injured before the fight ever happens.
Well, it's 90 miles from his house, so he could actually, drive up there, train and relax for a little bit, then do a second workout. Askren, he said some things about him, but Askren wants to work with him. He says, yeah, I'll coach him. I'll teach him how to wrestle. Pettis is up there. Duke is no striking as good as anybody. So I think that's going to be, where he's going to make his home. But he's not tipping his hand, because I've had Ben Askren ask me, hey, have you heard anything where Punk's gonna train?
Yeah, and the thing is Duke. You know what? I'm not even going to make that joke. I was going to make a joke about Duke having plenty of experience promoting fighters with no experience, or retarded kickboxers, but I didn't. I'm not going to make that joke. I don't think. I mean, I figure I can make that joke because your audience is a little edgier than most, so I can say stuff like that. But,
right.
Like, I don't know, man. Like, I really have a feeling like he is going to move somewhere. I know Cormier wants him at AKA really bad. I know Top Team wants him, and he's friends with Cole Miller and people like that. So, who knows, man? Who knows where he ends up, man? But like, I can't imagine. I mean, that show is so dead. The Ultimate Fighter. I mean, I haven't watched it in years, and I can't imagine that a Glenn Robinson, and I love Glenn, dude. I have for years, but like, I can't imagine that a Glenn Robinson and Dan Lambert season is going to make people go, oh my God, I can't wait to see that. I'm going to tune in. If a championship tournament didn't do the trick for ratings, then nothing will, unless you put Brock Lesnar back on there.
Yeah, I was really shocked at the ratings for Tough 20, I guess it was, because it was like they're going for a belt, and a few of the girls on there were kind of cute, and it was like, well, shit, if that ain't gonna work, what the fuck is?
Yeah, nothing is. I mean, dude, Rose Namajunas, look, she's got a long way to go, but she is attractive. She is good at fighting. She's exciting to watch. She's got a lot of holes in her game she needs to shore up. But like, if she didn't do it, like if she doesn't draw people to TV, that's nothing is, man. I think that show should be shot and put out the pasture or something at some point very soon, because I don't think they can, unless you put Brock Lesnar coaching and get CM Punk or something like it. Just nothing is going to be interesting enough to keep people tuned in.
Yeah, or maybe only do it once a year, but I guess the contract with Fox calls for 2 seasons a year, and they just need to provide content.
Well, and if they didn't do 82,000 other versions of the show for Fight Pass, which nobody watches, around the world, maybe they would have enough talent to do something interesting, but they're just spread so thin. But, I mean, that's the story of the UFC in 2014 and 2015. We are spread too thin.
Yep, and that's why they're going after CM Punk. That's why the Rampage Jackson rumors are out there, and I'm sure anybody else with a name. I'm sure they'll revisit Gina Carano after her movie. She just got cast in something with GSP.
Yep, yeah, the new Kickboxer remake.
Okay, yeah. So I'm sure they'll revisit that, get her in the cage. But as time goes on, her name value decreases because I think the last time she was in the cage was 2009. And, she really hasn't had that breakthrough role yet in Hollywood.
Well, that's because she's terrible at acting. Like
that could be an issue. Yeah.
If we're being honest, Brian, she is terrible at acting. Like Rhonda's acting, limited acting so far that I've seen has been world better than Gina Carano. Like Gina is honestly one of the worst actresses I've ever seen on a TV screen. So like I'm actually amazed she's lasted this long and has not already been in the UFC.
Wow. And before I let you go, this is the last one, man. There's a new romance I heard. Ronda Rousey and the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, The Rock. Have you heard that?
I have not. I would be very surprised, as The Rock has been dating the same person for about 7 years. And unless they broke up just in the last few weeks, I don't see that. I did see your tweets on that. That made me chuckle. And if they had kids.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Can you imagine? Like, those kids would take over the world. Because they'd be huge, they'd be muscular, they'd probably be attractive. Like, they would take over the world. None of us would stand a chance if The Rock and Ronda Rousey made a baby. I don't think it's true. They have the same agent. They're seen together at things a lot because they have the same agent. But like, I don't know, man. I don't know that I believe that. Part of me hopes it's true though, because it would be awesome.
Yeah, it could be just because they've been seen together because of Brad Slater at William Morris Endeavor. But hey, man, it's always fun talking to you. It's a little different with no beer in front of us. At least I don't have any beer yet. I don't know about you.
Yeah, like this is what people don't know. Like you and I used to have our differences, and then we settled them over beer. And now at UFC events, I try to meet up with you, and we drink a lot of beer and eat chicken wings. And I mean, what you're hearing right now, what you just heard from Brian and I, is what happens at Hooters generally in Las Vegas. But now you got to hear it, so it's kind of nice.
Yeah, but there's a little bit more. The language is a little bit.
It is, and words are a little bit more slurred over time.
That's what I was going for.
Yeah, but because we've had cold beers and whiskeys, but yeah, like this was good, man. I enjoy it. I would love to do it anytime.
Well, tell them the story the last time we were out there. So I guess we have like 4 or 5 beers, and then I get this great idea.
Dude, you're gonna have to remind me. Wait.
I'm like, hey, let's do some whiskey, and it's like,
yeah, okay. This is why you have to remind me because it's the middle of the afternoon, and I'd had probably 4 beers at this point, and these are giant, like 32-ounce beers or whatever, and I am already tipsy, and then you and Jamie Huey have this great idea that we're gonna do shots of whiskey, and so you bust out the whiskey, and dude, I like whiskey, I do. I can't do it in the middle of the afternoon, but when you're hanging out with FRB, you've got to be able to hang no matter what time of the day is. So I took the shot. I did not feel good that night. I do remember that. That was a hell of a day, man. A lot of my days with you I filed them under my "that was the hell of a day" file in my filing cabinet.
Yeah. It's
always entertaining, man, and I always enjoy it.
Yeah, I come back from those Vegas trips and I'm like, never again. That was like the fucking hangover. It's just one never-ending cycle. That place is a blessing and a curse.
It is, man. And the thing is I live there, so like I don't partake in it until people such as yourself come to town, and then I feel like I've got to partake because FRB only comes to town once every couple of months. I've got to do it. But if you live in Vegas, it's a different story, man. I don't go to casinos. I don't go to the Strip unless I have to work. But I can see people who don't live there. I can see how they would be trouble, man, because I remember my first few times in Vegas, like I won $7,000 on the slot machine my first time at a casino. And I was like, this is the greatest fucking city I've ever been to in my entire life. Like, I can't wait to come back. And I've never really won any money since then. I've been drunk plenty of times. Vegas has taken more from me than I ever took from it. And I think that's probably most people's experience.
Yeah. I think I have the same experience. But all right, dude, it was good talking to you, man. And thanks for giving me an hour of your time and great insight as always. And we'll be talking soon.
Yeah, bud, I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, man. Be good.
All right.
right, welcome to the FRB Show, and maybe it might be a different name now because we got Filthy Tom Lawlor, the UFC fighter who's co-host now, and he's with me, and I have a guest that I'm really excited to talk to. This is somebody whose work that I've been reading since I was literally 10 years old, so a couple decades. He's the definitive voice on wrestling and mixed martial arts. He's the publisher for the past 30 years, I think, of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. His name is Dave Meltzer. What's up, Dave?
Not too much, Brian. I can't believe I've never spoken to you.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It literally is.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird to me. But yeah, that's so weird. But I have spoken to Tom a couple of times, so that's cool.
Yeah. I wanted to kick things off a little bit. It's really fresh in the news about Rampage Jackson, signing with the UFC again, and what have you heard about it? What's your take on it?
I mean, the thing is I can't believe that UFC would sign him unless they were real confident that there was a breach. Yet at the same time, Coker, and he's not the only one, people in Bellator are pretty adamant that they have the rights to him and he's still under contract to them. So that makes it really interesting. And I'm wondering exactly I don't know exactly what the story is as far as what they're claiming the breach is. I mean, I've seen enough to where it's something to the effect of that they had a complaint about something and then the contract states something about 45 days to rectify, and they believe they didn't rectify it, and I guess Bellator believes they did, that it wasn't a valid complaint or something, but I don't know exactly what the complaint is.
Yeah, I had some people tell me, hey, they're going to announce it last night, so that was Saturday, and I talked to some people at Bellator, and they're like, hey, we have a valid contract. So I was like, I didn't really know what to think about it. And Tom, what did you think about it? I'm sure you probably heard the rumor, or what did you think?
I think it's a very interesting development. I guess I have a question, Dave. How much of this do you think has to do with the lawsuit, if any?
I don't know that any does. I mean, the funny part of it is that I would think, if anything, with a lawsuit, that would be what you would avoid doing. Avoid making it look like you're just like doing, quote, underhanded tactics to throttle, a smaller promotion, because the whole gist of the lawsuit, UFC can be a big dominant company as long as they didn't do anything illegal to their competitors to get there. And I mean, I think that's what they're trying to find in the lawsuit, is that they used tactics that were illegal to get there. And I'm not sure exactly what that would be. I mean, because so many of these companies that we're talking about that were competitors went out of business not because of. It's you can't say it's not because of UFC in the sense of because UFC was so dominant, it was very difficult for them to play catch up. But it wasn't as if UFC went in there and a lot of them ran in trouble because they spent so much and they didn't have as much money as I guess they presumed that they would, that they would need or something like that. Because I remember when we talk about Affliction, we knew from day one how this was going to end up. I mean, it's just a question of how long it was going to take and to get there. And with some of the other ones, it's the same thing. They were running shows so deep in the red that sooner or later when you do that, you're going to be in trouble. And that wasn't UFC's doing. Did UFC? The fact that UFC was big probably helped some of them get funding at the beginning because the idea was, man, MMA is just exploding, so we should get in on this, and that really helped, like the IFL in that era. They got helped a lot by that. I would think that if anything, they would not want to make this move this week because of that, and that's another reason why I think that they've got to be 100% convinced that that there was a breach there and they could get Rampage back.
Yeah, David, and Tom kind of went into the next thing I wanted to talk about with the UFC lawsuit. They're talking about it could be as many as 700 or 800 plaintiffs, hundreds of millions of dollars allegedly, and a company that doesn't really mess around and that filed in a very labor-friendly area of Northern California. I know you're not a lawyer, but you've been around a few of these before. And when you read the text, did you see anything that's going to like impress a judge or a jury?
Well, you never know with a jury. That's why I don't think it's ever going to go to a jury. But the lawyers, when you look at their credentials, they're real heavyweight lawyers, and they're taking it on contingency. It's not like these fighters are going to be bled all this money for legal fees on a prayer. It's not going to work like that. So they're not going to be, and they've got to know that this case is going to be years and years and hours and hours and hours of work. So if they don't get a payoff, they don't get paid, and it's a waste of their time. So they've got to be confident. Now, when I read it, I didn't read anything that looked like I was expecting some like smoking gun or something, or something that was really going to blow me away that UFC did. And I didn't really see that in there. I saw like everything I saw was stuff that I know, and it's just like, you're looking at, they can be the dominant brand. I mean, every business has a dominant brand. As far as like, how they pay the fighters and everything, we all know they can pay the fighters more, but the lawsuit is more is about, anti-competitive practices. And I don't really know what they did that would constitute that, or how a jury would take certain things. I mean, they certainly were, aggressive, and I mean, where there were probably times. I mean, they brought up that show in September where UFC booked the venue, a couple of minutes away from the other venue, and tried to claim it was coincidence. It's like UFC runs 3,000 seat venues, 10 Bellator in the middle of Connecticut, all the time, right? I mean, it's like that was pretty naive to say that, but even so, is that illegal to run the same city as your competitor? If anything, it tells you that they're your competitor and you're allowed to compete. I don't know. I mean, so it's like I'm mixed on this one. I don't see the thing, but I'm thinking that, you get this level of lawyers, they've got to think there's something there. And then I'm not even sure what they're looking for, because when I asked, I was there, I was asking the different lawyers, like, okay, what's the goal here? And you just get like these kind of weird answers that don't tell you anything. So, I think that they want guys to be able to be free agents and go for the highest bidder. And I think that it's difficult the way the sport's structured, but it can be done if you play your contract right and you're lucky and you win your last fight and you're a big enough name. I mean, Gilbert Melendez did, but it's not easy to do. But it's not like it doesn't exist either.
Yeah, I read through it, and a couple things, and I'll have Tom comment on this. I thought like the thing about the likeness clause and the champions clause, I thought they had a decent point about.
I agree with that. Yeah,
the likeness clause, basically even after death, they can use your likeness, which. I heard about Mark Coleman. Mark Coleman's in the video game, and he got literally $0 to be in the video game.
A lot of guys got $0 to be in the video game. I mean, I don't know what when I talk to people, I don't know that many guys. I don't know. Well, this is what I was told, and Tom would know better than me on this, because when I asked, it was like, if you were in the commercial for the video game, you got paid for being in the commercial, but I don't know that guys got paid for actually being in the game. Now the merchandise, I thought that was a pretty good point, and I think it's a point that they're going to win on.
So, Tom, can you talk about the likeness?
I can't imagine using guys.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, at this point, I would pay for EA to put me in the video game, because it's been, multiple games and I haven't been in there, and I'm pretty damn sick of it, because I've been with the UFC for 6 years. But, I signed over those rights. The problem is that you run into a situation where it's like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. The alternative is that you fight for a promotion that's considered to be a lesser promotion and you don't get your name out there. Or you sign the contract and you fight for the UFC, which is the biggest company, and you hope that you can do well enough to make money there. So it's kind of a catch-22. And I think, out of all the things that was brought up in the lawsuit, I'm very I'm concerned, or I'm kind of perplexed by the fact that they said that they're not looking for a union and they're not looking to start some sort of collective bargaining, opportunity, when I think that would probably be their best avenue.
Yeah, because I mean, like when they're talking about like the percentages of revenue, that like an NBA or NFL get. I mean, the reason that those players, I mean, there was a period when the players in the NFL in particular, well, they, in all the sports got very little, in comparison to revenues, and it was collective bargaining that got there, not the generosity of the owners, and it's fighting because it's an individual sport. And I mean, it's harder, but even in those sports, I mean, it was some really rocky times, and trying to get everyone to stick together wasn't easy, and they went through some strikes and some, they all went through tough times to get it done. But I don't know how, like in a lawsuit, you can sue for a higher percentage of revenue. Now as far as the likeness stuff and getting something out of merchandise, yes, I think that's a valid clause. And the other one you said, I don't think the champions clause, I don't think that's going to hold up in court. I just don't think it will. I know why they put it in. If I was on their side, I would, because the last thing you want is a guy to be your world champion and then take off like BJ Penn did years and years ago. Because it kind of weakens the value of the championship when things like that happen. But aside from that, I don't know that anything else was a big smoking gun. And the champions clause, I don't know how much that doesn't really change the business that much, because as far as I know, even though it's in there, they've never actually used it, because since you guys both know that when a champion's contract is coming up, I mean they do everything to make sure that they negotiate a new contract before that last fight. And I don't know that I don't remember any time where they had a champion in the last fight of their deal actually go in there and risk him leaving or challenging that thing. They always try to sign him early, which just makes sense from their perspective.
Yeah, I mean, like John Jones, for instance, like they just you remember the. He was kind of stalling on Gustafsson. It was supposed to be UFC 178, and Dana was kind of after him, like, what are you afraid of? And it was really, he was looking for a new contract. He had 5 fights left on his deal, but he wanted a new one. And they eventually, they tore it up, and they gave him a new contract. Yeah.
So, I mean, the only guy that I remember, because it's pretty publicized, there may be others, but the one I remember was Roy Nelson, who, they really tried to sign before the last fight of his deal, and I forgot who the fight was with. I don't know if it was the Miocic fight.
Stipe. I think in Calgary.
So that was that the Miocic fight?
Yeah. July of 2013, I think. Yeah.
So he went in there, and it was essentially a gamble. If he had won that fight, he would go out and cut to whoever and be a legitimate free agent, and then he lost. So whatever his, it hurt his bargaining power. And I don't know if he, got a raise or what happened as far as, he set his new deal, but he stayed with the company. I know that. So, but usually, I mean, it's very rare where you have a guy, as far as like a named guy, in the last fight of his deal, without them, trying to sign him first.
I believe it was pretty publicized that Weidman did the same thing. I'm not sure if it was before the first fight with Anderson or the second, but I remember reading that he had said he was going to wait to restructure the deal because he was going to get more money after he defeated Anderson Silva.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one too. Yeah.
I remember that. I think it was after the first fight, which was kind of interesting to me, because I was like, well, go ahead and get your raise, because if you beat Anderson Silva, they're going to tear up that contract anyway.
Yeah.
But, I got this question, and you would be the guy to ask about it. Like, does this open the door for a suit against WWE, a serious suit? I know they had one a few years ago about, what was it? Independent contractor versus employee. Do you think this opens up the door for a legitimate suit against Vince McMahon?
If they win, I almost see it as unavoidable, because it was funny when I'm reading this, everything that was in there, aside from the merchandise thing and the Champions Clause, which aren't, but everything else, you could say the same thing about WWE. I mean, as far as like percentage of revenues, and that's not really what it is, but as far as like employees versus independent contractors, and more the what's the word? The not monopoly, but the domination of the business and the effect. It's so it's almost impossible to compete with WWE in wrestling. I think it's harder to compete with WWE than with UFC, because the one thing with UFC with competing with UFC is there are other networks. They don't pay a lot, but there's a lot of openings for television to start a company. I mean, it's not like you can necessarily get rich and there's big money out there, but it does exist. Whereas with pro wrestling, it's like you've seen with pro wrestling, even if you can get ratings, TV stations don't want you. With MMA, there's some MMA shows that they don't even really draw what I would call big ratings, but they're still there because it's a sport and everybody wants live sports. And pro wrestling, by not being live sports, it's even as popular as it is, it's not as attractive to TV stations. And WWE is just so far ahead, and they control all the top talent, and there's not really a free marketing thing in the sense that there's nowhere for the top talent to go if they're not in WWE and make anywhere close to the money they make in WWE, which is similar to UFC, but there are exceptions. I mean, there are guys in Bellator that are making some money, that the bigger, older names, with especially with TNA going down now. It really doesn't exist in wrestling. I mean, they're guys who can. The Matt Hardys can make their own schedule and work indies and make a good living for sure. But it's still not like a WWE kind of living.
Sure. And Tom, you can comment a little bit, because I saw that Ring of Honor was very interested in bringing you in, and I think they did. But then because it was going to be on pay-per-view, they pulled you off.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what happened behind the scenes with that situation, but the UFC was not happy about the fact that TMZ was putting out, frivolous information regarding my status with Ring of Honor. I was just asked to go to the shows and, be in Red Dragon's corner, which was probably the highlight of my past couple of years on the planet. To be honest, I had a blast doing it. And unfortunately, TMZ kind of ruined it for me. So, it's a tough situation when you're trying to integrate both. I wish I could have kept working with the Ring of Honor. But, unfortunately, I've got bigger fish to fry in the UFC, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
Dave, real quick, are you saying that you don't see Dario Cueto as being able to compete with the WWE? Is that what you're saying? The government's not going to go with that one?
Oh God! I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, I like that show, but I mean, I look at those viewing figures, and it's just like, at some point, when you're spending as much money as they're spending, for so few viewers, it's almost like when I would see the payoff numbers for Affliction, and I'd go like, oh my God, they're spending so. I mean, it's like, I want to see fighters make money, but they're spending so much, and there's no way that they can ever get enough revenue to cover this. And it's kind of like, at some point, with any company, at some point when you're losing lots of money, it doesn't go on forever usually. I mean, even WCW didn't go on forever, and some people thought it would. So yeah.
And Dave, the lawsuit, it kind of came at an interesting time, because I know it's been many years in the making, but it kind of came along at a time where the UFC business trends are going downward. They got a $500 million loan due this year, which obviously they won't have to pay back all at once. It'll be restructured. But I would think their performance this year will have a lot to do with the terms under which they'll repay that loan.
Yeah, well, I think that they're. They had a bad year due to injuries and just every fight falling apart. If the next couple of months go, without key injuries and all these main events on the next 3 pay-per-views go as planned, I mean, I think that they should do pretty well. And the who set those interest rates, they may restructure the other way, going like, well, now it's turned around and it's popular again. Which whether that's indicative of it or not, I don't know. In fact, I don't know that anyone really knows. I mean, the only thing that I can say from they're making way more from television, because of all the international deals than they ever had before. But what hurt them this year, obviously, was that the pay-per-view numbers were so much lower. And I don't know if part of the reason that they were lower is because, look at the cards. It's like when people go like, oh, pay-per-view's dead, look at these numbers. And I go like, when I look at the main events on these pay-per-views, they did about what I expected. It wasn't like there was some show where I'm going like, man, this show's going to do 500,000 buys, and it does 250 like some of the boxing shows have, where I was going like, ooh, there's, with Manny, you know what I mean? It's like, Manny just, there's a big difference between this Manny Pacquiao and the old Manny Pacquiao. People have just lost interest in him.
He did about 300 from what I read.
a little over 3 is what I heard on the last one. Yeah.
Okay.
Now these 3 shows coming up, especially this next one. I mean, this next one to me is going to really tell the story. If this one does, say, 600,000, and I really think it's going to do more, but if it does, then that's okay. The pay-per-view business is hurting. If it does, if it does 900, then it's like, well, you know, I mean, all indications I have is that if you give the people the fight that they really want to see and you promote it really well, people will buy it. Just throwing something out there and calling it pay-per-view, that doesn't mean anything now because people are very, you know, with so much UFC, you know, it's people are very willing to skip the UFC. I mean, we all know. I mean, friends, you know, I had friends who, when UFC was doing, let's say, 6 or 8 shows a year, I mean, that was like the big night out, and we would never miss a UFC. And, you know, for them, you know, I do expect that they'll actually be over for Jones and Cormier, but I haven't seen some of them for UFC in a long time because, you know, it's just, there's so many shows and there's nothing that big. There hasn't been anything super big since, you know, 168, I think. So yeah. This is going to be the real test to see what does the super big fight do.
And Tom, you know, I know you haven't fought in a while because, you know, you hurt your knee. But have you, talking to some of the guys and maybe, you know, during your last fight, have you seen a difference in the discretionary bonuses? Because I would think those bonuses are directly tied to how they did at the gate and how they did on pay-per-view for that particular card.
I have not seen much of a difference, to be honest. But with that being said, I've also been out for 18 months. So, you know, almost since the inception of that Fox deal, I haven't been, you know, in the game. I did receive a discretionary bonus for my last fight about 3 or 4 months after the fight, which was a very welcome paycheck for me. But, you know, as far as the general fighter goes, out of the general population that the UFC has, I'm not sure how much of a difference they're seeing in, you know, in their paycheck as opposed to before. Now, with that being said, we also have to talk about the sponsorship deal with Reebok. And, you know, a lot of people have been pretty down on that. And I am very vocal about how good it is for the fighters in retrospect. There have been times where I've made, you know, an equal purse from sponsorship checks as I did from the UFC for a fight, but those days are long gone.
When did that turn around? Because I mean, I've heard the same. I mean, I know some guys that were really making really good money, and not even necessarily giant names that you know that were making really good money sponsorship for years, and then you know there was that period, and then it really dwindled down, and then the last year before this Reebok thing came, I mean, I had heard that they'd gotten, you know, from different people that had just gotten really bad. So you know, and now UFC. You know, now it's again, this whole the Reebok thing, which is going to be very interesting, is like, what in actual money, what does this mean? Is what's going to mean for everybody?
Yeah, it will probably mean a lot of pumps being sent out to the various UFC fighters. Hopefully, a lot of Reebok pump shoes. I'd say, I don't know, about 2 years, about 2.5 years ago is when the sponsorship money probably started drying up pretty well there. You know, I just think there's so many guys out there. There's so many different names, and I don't think the companies get a big return investment on the sponsorship deals that they have with the individual fighters. Now, whether that remains to be the case with Reebok, you know, that remains to be seen. I think Reebok will do better than the majority of sponsors, because the majority of sponsors are dealing with 1 or 2 fighters per card. They don't get the same recognition that Reebok obviously already has and will get by dealing with the UFC exclusively. So I think Reebok will get a good return, and I think the fighters, just based on what I've heard, it'll be a better situation for them.
Yeah, and I guess the other benefit would be, you know, they don't have to like chase down sponsors and be like, you know, because they're having a problem right now with Fear the Fighter. Apparently, you know, they didn't pay a bunch of people, and you know, I think it's because they're broke. I don't think it's because they're trying to be assholes about it and renege on promises. I think they're just broke.
I mean, that's happened to a lot of companies. I mean, the one thing that I noted in years ago is that first wave of UFC sponsors that, you know, like in Zion's being the famous one, is that, that they clearly put a lot of money into it, and for what, I don't know how well it paid off. I wonder what that meant. But I mean, UFC does. I mean, UFC does have some good, like Bud Light and stuff. I mean, they have some good, mainstream, Harley. I mean, big time sponsors. But like with the fighters and everything, yeah. I mean, there was the whole situation where a lot of guys were getting paid late or not getting paid, and then you had the sponsorship tax thing, which obviously was going to hurt because so much of the money that they would spend for sponsorship went to UFC and not the fighters. So if nothing else, I mean, I from their perspective, one of the arguments here obviously is that you don't have to worry about chasing sponsors because it's like done for you, and it's almost like an automatic. Especially for like the lower guys that don't really have big names and everything, they're at least going to get some money.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the days like I think Joe Stevens. I don't know if Joe Stevenson said it publicly or somebody said it to me. He got $25,000 UFC 74 to wear a T-shirt. That was 2007. 25 grand. I think this whole sponsor market was it was all bullshit. It was just like it was not sustainable. And I think maybe the guys got used to it too much, and they said, this is what it is. But really, it was a bubble. Yeah.
Because so many sponsors spent a lot of money without much return, and so then it was, at some point it was going to go back to to a more rational thing. And then when the UFC took the tax, then it also changed that, and but if this helps, I mean, like the whole thing on this one is like, I just think like we got to wait and see. I mean, we got to see what the rank and file guy gets compared to what they were getting, and if it's a better deal, then it's a better deal. I mean, I know that there's going to be some middlemen that are not happy because they were the middlemen, but and it could be worse too. I mean, I'm not trying to like say, oh, this is the greatest thing, but to me, it's like sit and wait and find out what the real money is that you get for these fights, and if it's better than it was before, then it's a plus. Yeah,
I mean, I've heard managers, they're talking about like $1,500 or $2,000 for a main card on FS1 or a pay-per-view, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you $1,500? I'm like, yeah, that's what it is. So I guess he can't get any worse.
I can't imagine if the Reebok money, whatever it is, I can't imagine it being that low. I mean, but I could be wrong too. But it just feels like it's going to be more than that.
Yeah.
I mean, if they get a few pair of Allen Iversons, size 13, I'll be happy. So.
Yeah. Or the Sean Kemp, because I was trying to when the deal first came out, I was trying to like, what is Reebok known for? And I came up with Dave versus Dan, right? The 92.
Oh God, that's for the Olympics. Yeah.
Yeah, the Olympics. Yeah. I came up with Sean Kemp 94. Before he had, just messed his career up. And then the last I remember, Allen Iverson in like 2000 or 2001. And then from there, I can't remember really anything that they've been involved in other than the NFL uniforms.
Oh, you're missing out big time. They are huge in the CrossFit world. Okay. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is like they look at it from the standpoint of we haven't seen their name on these athletes in years, but they are absolutely all over CrossFit. And with the way that's blown up, I think they're doing pretty well for themselves. They have a huge headquarters in Canton, Mass., and they have a big CrossFit facility there. But even more importantly than that, Brian, you're missing out on the fact that they sponsored the 1996 U.S. Women's Gymnastics starring Dominique Moceanu.
Oh, the legendary Dominique Moceanu. Yeah. Didn't she divorce her parents?
I'm not sure, but I have a very soft spot in my heart for her.
1996, huh? What did they call them? The Magnificent Seven?
They can call them whatever they want, but they're magnificent in my eyes. That's for sure.
So, Dave, the last few pay-per-views, because I was reading The Observer, which people can subscribe to on F4W FWonline.com, something that I've been a subscriber.
FWonline.com.
Oh, F4W Online.
You can just go to WrestlingObserver.com and they'll get you there too.
Okay, yeah,
which is easier to remember.
There you go. Yeah, and you put in there, not to give away the payoff too much, but I guess it's out there already. So you put out some of the pay-per-view figures for the last 4 events,
right?
And it looked like 3 of them were under 200,000. And then the last...
Right. And I think that the McGregor one topped. The McGregor one, I think, was a little bit, it was actually with Demetrius and Cariaso, was a little above 200, which I thought, that was a weird one because it was like, that undercard was so good, but that main event was like such a negative. But the other 2, I think, were probably slightly under 2. And then the last one was probably, 375 to 4 in that range, which was a little bit more, which is actually... after Manny did the show over 3, I was thinking if they did 3, I would be happy, and they beat it handily. So I thought that was a good. I thought the last one was a good sign. The other ones, like I said, they weren't good numbers, but again, a show headlined by Demetrius Johnson and Cariaso, I thought could have done terrible had it not had a good undercard. And then Aldo Mendez in Brazil, that was going to be a tough sell, even as much as I actually really loved that fight and was looking forward to it. And then the what was the other one that we're talking about? The Hunt one, the Hunt for Doom. I would say that was disappointing, but it wasn't when I got the number. I'd already it had already gotten like that night. That night was a real wake up call because you guys were probably all around, but everything I was hearing that night, all people were talking about was the Bellator show. And the UFC had a great show and nobody was talking about it. I mean, as far as like those were fun fights, but when it was over, it was like, God, it was almost like it didn't exist. So then I was kind of expecting a bad number. Going in, I would have thought Hunt and Verdum heavyweight title, even interim, should have done better. But you had a free show that everybody was talking about. So there you go.
So what you were talking earlier, 182 with Jones in DC. You think about 600,000, and then
I thought when I said 600, I was thinking that would be a disaster of a number. I really think God, those commercials are so good. I 800 to 900. I think $1 million sounds a little ambitious, but I've got to think over 800. I mean, if it does less. I would be disappointed if it did less than 800 with everything going for it. I mean, to me, it's like that's like a dream fight because it's 2 great personalities with this storyline that everybody knows and these great television commercials, and they're both essentially unbeaten, fantastic fighters, which is the other part of it. It's like you got for every different aspect that people like MMA, whether it's theatrics or personalities or fight style or wins and losses, it's almost like or just conjecture on who's going to beat who. This fight to me delivers on every account. It's just like there's I've never seen John Jones really challenged except for the one time with Gustafsson, but I've never seen Cormier challenged really as far as like anyone beating him at all. So it's just like you've got these 2, You know what I mean? That's like the perfect thing is you've got these 2 guys that you just watch and you can't imagine seeing them lose because you've never seen them get beat up, and one of them is going to lose most likely. And I mean, I can play it out in my head and in a way where I can see either one winning. So it's the intrigue is there, and someone's going to lose face because they both talk so big, and I think that it's going to be a super atmosphere because I think the people in the building are just going to want DC to win like so fierce. Whether it's going to happen is a different story, but they're going to want it. It's like this is like the big time super fight to me.
It's like the irresistible force meets the immovable object.
It's Hogan and Andre, except I knew who was going to win that one going in.
Hey, Dave, I got to ask you: have you seen the Twitter site or the Twitter account that does all the Gorilla Monsoon things, all of his lines?
You know what? I don't think I'd follow that one.
It's called Fake Gorilla, and
no, I'm not. Wow, I'll
yeah, it's got all of his sayings like history has been made, and then fill in the arena, and what's some of his like highly unlikely, and let's get the official word, and what's the one with the muscle that's in the back of your neck?
The trapezius?
No, he had this very specialized name for it. Tom, do you know what I'm talking about? He had the
No.
You ever used the medulla oblongata? That was Lou Albano who did the medulla oblongata.
There was some. I know he used to also talk about the lateral ligaments, and he just said, "Yeah, Monsoon was him and Heenan just had an incredible chemistry." But that kind of brings me to the next thing. WrestleMania season is pretty close. It kicks off in earnest after the Royal Rumble, which is in late January. And what are you hearing as far as like a rough draft outline for what they're going for late March in actually your neck of the woods out there in the San Jose area?
Yeah. It's not as I mean, when I'm thinking about, like, usually at this point, I kind of know the card. And right now, I mean, I'm thinking Sting Triple H. I mean, I don't know the card other than Sting Triple H. I know Reigns and Lesnar has been the plan for months and months, and there's nothing that I've heard that indicates that's changing. But all kinds of people think for reasons on both guys that it will end up changing. I sense Cena and Rusev just because they're building Rusev up for somebody big. And, I mean, when you look at it, I mean, Undertaker and Wyatt, I know is in the plans if Undertaker can go, but my God, when I see the Undertaker pictures, I'm thinking that, like, I don't know that I think he may be done. And when I go through that, it's like that kind of takes care of everybody because I think Rock's doing a movie, so he's out. Batista's doing all kinds of acting. I don't sense he's coming back. I'm almost sure Austin's not coming back this year, if ever. So, what special, it's like, who like at the money moving level am I leaving out? That may be the card.
Now, Tom, what do you think of that? Because to me, that sounds like a weak WrestleMania card.
I mean, I'll watch it. I'm not going to say I'd be excited about it. I'm really not excited to see Reigns at the top of the card. He's just missing something. I was very excited when Ambrose was getting a push. I thought perhaps he could be almost like the next Stone Cold in a way, but they kind of screwed that up with the way that they booked him. I think WrestleMania is going to sell itself, but on the flip side, Reigns and Lesnar, not excited about it. I don't think putting The Undertaker with Bray Wyatt, of all people, would even, be the best scenario at this point. And there's really nothing that's leaving me, clamoring for more. Maybe a Daniel Bryan return will change that a little bit, but, things just seem pretty stale right now.
Now, Dave mentioned Sting. Now, Tom, didn't you have a run-in with Sting? Or am I imagining? I mean, Dave, I don't know if you know this story, but it's pretty good.
I had an argument with Sting.
Well,
really?
No, but
it was at TNA. I want to say I'm not even sure what the pay-per-view was, but it was in Boston about a year and a half ago, and I was pretty inebriated. I won't lie. I could be found throughout the first few rows during that pay-per-view, standing up at inopportune times and yelling expletives at the performers. But Sting was up on the top rope, and I was yelling at him, like, "Get off my TV! Get out of here! You suck! You're old!" And he looks at me and he goes, "For my age?" And I thought to myself, this guy's like in his 50s. He's doing pretty damn good. So
he really is. He really is. I saw him in August, and he's 55 years old, and it's, what, you look pretty good and healthy for 55 years old.
Yeah, he shut me down pretty quick. So ever since then, now I'm a big time Sting fan.
Yeah.
I thought there was more to it. I thought it was like you ran into him, like,
no,
because he's a pretty big guy.
The only guy that I've beaten up that anybody would know on record is probably Devon Dudley. But
you got into it with Devon Dudley?
No. I say beaten up, but no, we used to just. I would train. I was fortunate enough to train with him when I was doing some pro wrestling, and we would wrestle around, and I would, obviously I've got a better background than he does, so I would get the upper hand. Saying beat up sounds kind of worse than it actually is, but I would out wrestle Devon.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to do the same to Sting because I would put a hurting on that guy for sure.
I just got a couple more things. Wanted to ask Dave because I I saw something that your name came up as a possible play-by-play partner for JR on the New Japan show. Did I read that right? Or
Kinda. I mean, it was never really what I would call serious, but it was it wasn't like I was ever expecting anything like that. I mean, I know that the name was thrown in there. I mean, it was a short period of time because they wanted Mike Tenay and Jim Ross together, and Jim Ross wanted that real bad, and it just didn't happen because TNA, in their infinite wisdom, decided that Jeff Jarrett was competition. So that lagged on until probably right around Thanksgiving, and it was right, and maybe even after. I think it was only like 2 weeks ago or so it was only like a week or two ago when it really finalized because JR sent texts to Dixie Carter and John Gaborik, and it was just like, I'll put him over, I'll put TNA over, we just want to do the show together, and Mike was the right guy to work with JR. It was just the right pairing, and they turned it down. So at that point, it was like, well, okay, who's going to be? Because they really were looking at that, and I had heard that it was going to come down to John Pollock, who does live audio wrestling, and he does wrestling and MMA for the Fight Network, who's a good friend of mine, and Matt Stryker, and somebody had talked to me about that, and I was just like, well, I think John would do really well in this role because he knows Japan wrestling, and I think that Jim Ross is like the best announcer of a match that maybe there's ever been, but certainly of this generation when it comes to pro wrestling. But he's not a guy who watches New Japan Weekly. I mean, he'll know some of the names and all that, but you need an expert with Jim Ross. I mean, I was pretty strong. You need an expert with Jim Ross. I mean, he can handle the bell-to-bell, and he'll have a good idea or a vague idea of the stories, but there's still things, that you just would not recognize unless, so you needed a New Japan expert. And I thought John was the guy. And then, I just wasn't that high on Stryker. Plus, again, and this is something I'm getting criticized like crazy for ripping on Stryker, but I am not really, Stryker, when I watch him on Lucha Underground, I'm just not really a fan of his, and in WWE, I liked him at first in both companies. It's like he's a guy who, when you first listen to him, he's actually he's got some good qualities, but then when you see him week after week, it just, I don't know what it is. I mean, he should be a heel manager. That's why, and I've always thought that. Matt Stryker's a great heel manager because there's something inherently annoying about him, which is a good quality for a lot of, for a heel manager. It's not a good quality for a lead television announcer. But so anyway, in the gist of different things, apparently my name came up, and I never spoke to Jeff about it, but I did email him, and when it was actually, I had heard somebody said that your name has come up, but they had decided without asking me, it was like, he'll never do it. He'll never do it, and it was like, that's probably like the wrong thing to say in the sense of, you know what I mean? It's like if somebody tells you, Tom, you're probably the same way. If somebody tells you, but let's say it's something that you really don't even want to do, but they go, Tom, you could never do that, All of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute. I know I didn't really want to do it, but the hell, I could do it great, right? So I got that thing, and I just kind of emailed Jeff, and I go, I actually said this. I go like, Jeff, I would actually do great. I just want you to know this.
Yeah.
No, I would actually kill it doing the show, and so that was it. And he never got back to me or anything. I mean, he got back. Well, he did. We just had emails, but it was nothing serious. And then it was just like, it's not going to be, he just said, we talked about it, and whatever it was, you've never done it before. It wasn't anything bad or anything. It was just like whatever. And so I thought, okay, so John's getting it, which I was real happy about that actually, because so I talked. It was last Sunday night. John, I do the live audio wrestling show at midnight Eastern every Sunday night, and John is actually the guy who calls me to just wake me up or whatever, or just go like we're on. So I go, John, it's like I guess you're doing it, and he goes, no, they told me yesterday I'm not. And then John goes, I thought for sure you were doing it, and it's like no, and then it's like, oh my God, it's Stryker. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's how it went down. So yeah, that's the story.
Well, another guy, Chael Sonnen was contacted.
Chael Sonnen, Jeff talked to Chael Sonnen.
Yeah, and the story about that was Jeff. They talked, and Jeff said, "Chael, I'll be honest with you, I don't know who you are."
Yeah, that was J. I presume that's JR doing.
Well, yeah, but he said, I have somebody that helps me with production, and they know exactly who you are and that I need to talk to you. And basically it came down to a base amount of money to go over to Japan, and then a cut of the pay-per-view for promoting it. Mm-hmm. And ultimately he felt uncomfortable about a lack of product knowledge. Because, I mean, his exposure to New Japan is basically me just bothering him about it. so I'm like, hey, chill. How about this guy AJ Styles? Go over to Japan, beat him up, make a bunch of money, and come back with a belt. And he's like, yeah, it looks pretty interesting. But I think the lack of product knowledge and he didn't know, he didn't think it was going to do very well on pay-per-view. So he was working the deal through JR. And then he just, took his name out of the hat when the ESPN deal for him came along.
Yeah, I'd heard his name. I'd heard a couple of other names. Mauro Ranallo was another name I know that was at least in the discussion. And the money wasn't. I don't think the money was that big. And just on such a small budget. And the other thing too is just that nobody knows how well it will do. By all logic, it shouldn't do well. But maybe, the day of the show, there'll be momentum. I don't know. I mean, like in my world, my insular little world, people are so excited about the show, but I know that's not the, it's a very small percentage of the people. I mean, like for me, it's just like, UFC and that Tokyo Dome all day. It's going to be like this crazy night that everyone's coming over my house till 3 a.m. and then I'm doing a radio show, and it's like, that type of a thing. But I know that like, for the, even for wrestling fans, they're not going to know because they're not on television yet. And these are names that American fans don't know, and pay-per-view's a tough business for wrestling right now.
Absolutely. Hey, Tom, do you have anything for Dave about the Wrestle Kingdom card?
Not so many questions. The card's pretty set and done at this point. I'm more concerned with how they're going to be able to fit everything onto the show. Especially with what do they have, Dave? 11 matches, 12 matches scheduled?
I think it's 10.
Okay.
Well, so it's 11 matches, but the first match, which is going to be a Royal Rumble, that's going to be on the pre-show. So the rest of the card
is that like the Aztec Battle Royal?
It's the exact same thing. Oh, wasn't that the great? You watch Wednesday? Wasn't that the greatest thing when Dario Cueto comes out there and he goes, "I invented this thing," and he's explaining, and it's going like, "Man, that sounds what." You know what I mean? It's like, how do you go on television and say you invented the Royal Rumble?
So,
but
Tom,
he did.
I get the idea you like Lucha Underground.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the show. I was just thinking about how absolutely absurd it is that Dario Cueto went on there and said that he had come up with this great idea for a match where people will enter at intervals, and then the last man standing was the champion.
That's amazing. I'm gonna have to start putting that on my DVR.
I like the show. The guys. I mean, the thing with the Lucha Underground, some of those guys from Mexico, like Phoenix. I mean, they're just so ridiculously. I mean, I'm watching it going like, oh my God, like if you did half as much, I would remember it more. But my God, you do some stuff that's so unbelievable. Like if you just want to see mind-blowing gymnastic flying, I mean that show is for you. There was a guy King Cuerno, who did this tope, dive through the ropes. And I mean that's a standard move in wrestling. But it was like he flew so far on Wednesday night show that I'm like, did I really see that? I was like, it reminded me like when I was a kid and I would watch Randy Savage and I would go like, it's got to be wires because nobody can really jump that high off the top rope and not like break their body into a landing. But he did it every single show. So, but as far as like crazy moves, that show's filled with them.
Yeah, and that's on the El Rey network, which oddly enough I get. I don't have like the highest tier cable, but for whatever reason I get El Rey network, and I also get Destination America, which I was reading The Observer this week, and you used that line in their Infinite Wisdom, if I could say it right. They're going to do it on Fridays, I guess 8 to 10.
Friday, TNA thought it was going to be on Wednesday when they cut the deal, and then Destination America, like last week, decided was going to be on Friday, and I think that their mentality was that there's all these millions of wrestling fans that are used to watching wrestling on Friday, and WWE's moving SmackDown to Thursday, so it's like this night that wrestling fans are in tune to. So that's the mentality behind it. I don't know if it's the right mentality. My gut is it's the wrong mentality, but they're the ones, it's like, it's going to be Friday night. I mean, the deal from what I understand is it's going to be like Friday from 7, it's going to be, so Friday from 7 to 9 will be last week's show. Okay, so they're going to, it's like a 6-hour block. They're going to have last week's show from 7 to 9, then 9 to 11 will be the first run of the new show, and then 9 to 11 will be a repeat of what was on from 11 to 1 will be a repeat of 9 to 11.
So 6 hours of TNA. That's amazing.
6 hours of TNA, and then come back Saturday morning with another 2 hours at 10 a.m. Eastern, which will be the same show as on Friday night, coming right back, except like a new segment, the new segment or two will be exclusive on Saturday morning.
Are you going to be watching that, Tom? TNA or Impact?
That's a good question. If it was on a Wednesday, I would definitely say 100%, but it might get kicked over to the DVR now. Contrary to popular belief, there are wrestling fans who have night lives. I'm not saying that I'm one of them necessarily, but sometimes every once in a while on a Friday, I find something else to do there. So, actually, this made me think of it though. Dave, we could backtrack a little bit. Is there any way possible, perhaps, that Rampage's contract that was with Bellator and Viacom maybe was breached due to the fact that no longer he'd be working for TNA, or is that?
It was funny you bring that up, because I was wondering, because I actually was I was doing some research on some story, and I don't remember what it was, and it was the issue that came out the week that Rampage signed his contract. So it was like, wow, that's pretty, this morning. And it's like, wow, that's pretty timely. Let me just reread this. And it was like, if you remember, it was positioned as a TNA and Bellator contract. It wasn't like Tito, when Tito came in, he was going to do Bellator, but he might do some TNA, or Mo was positioned as both, and so was Rampage. Yep. And so I was wondering, maybe that's the breach, other than the fact that Rampage got sick of doing TNA really quick and didn't want to do it anymore, like happens with him with every company he works for. But I suppose that's a possibility, because that's how it was positioned, and then they don't have a wrestling promotion anymore on that station, so they don't really care about TNA anymore.
Yeah, and Dave, I just one last thing for you before I let you get back to what you were doing, probably finishing up the Observer, but it's a question that a lot of people ask, and I was like, you know what, that's an incredible question. How much longer are you going to do this, and who could possibly take over the Observer? Because, I mean, you do 30 to 40,000 words a week. You basically write a book every week about pro wrestling and MMA. And I just can't imagine there being another human being in the 7 billion people in this world who can do what you do.
Yeah, I have like some sick affliction. You know what I mean? And the funny part is that like I really kind of love it. So it's not like I don't necessarily love Tuesday, but the other 6 days I'm usually pretty fine with. So. I don't really have an answer. I mean, it's not like when people will ask me something like that, it's like I just can't imagine not doing it. So, and it's not like it's, thank God it's not like a physical thing, because like if I was like an athlete, and God, I mean, I can just imagine, when athletes get to be 35, 40 and it's done, and it's kind of like you dedicate your whole life and you're just like so mentally in tune with that, and now you've got to, just like actually basically give it up, or do it at like a recreational level, but that's a totally different thing. But I think I can do this until I go like completely insane, and I just don't feel like I'm on the verge of that just yet. Because if I survive those years of WCW, I think I can survive like almost anything, when it comes to this stuff. I mean, God, I watch Raw for 3 hours on Monday, and as much as people think that it puts me in a bad mood, it really doesn't, because a bad Raw show, it just means that I've got, more comedy to work with. And a good Raw show is just like, that's fun. That's great.
The other thing I often wonder is, because you come up with these obituaries, like, do you have these obituaries like pre-written, and then whenever somebody dies, you're like, okay, there we go?
No. People think I've got like this file, and I know, like, it was funny because when I worked at a newspaper years ago, like, there would be like famous celebrities in their 80s, and we actually did have like obituaries written, so they're like, ready to go. But no, it's too spooky. I mean, even like, like when, if someone is on the verge, so to speak, and you kind of know like the day's coming, I will not start the obituary until they're dead. I mean, I won't even start researching it. I just feel, I don't know what it is about that, but yeah, I will not even research someone like in that, like for something like that until like it's it. And those are, if they're written the week that it happens, I mean, that's a pretty big endeavor. I mean, sometimes I'll wait till the week after just to, be able to reflect better. But like if it's on, depending on the person and the significance and everything, I'll just drop everything.
Go ahead, Dave.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, the one thing about it is like if it's a young guy, that's not really a lot of fun to do. But sometimes, like if it's someone who's like older, and you research and you kind of like get into like the time and place, and sometimes now with YouTube, you can see like videos from the 60s and 70s and stuff. Not a lot of it, but it's there for the bigger stars. And I really kind of get it. There's a good part of it in the sense that I kind of get a kick out of like trying to like put myself into like the time and place that this guy was in at different points in their life, and there's a sense of learning when I do those things, because I think I learn more on those things than anything else I do. So it's not there's sadness, but it's like, again, I mean, there's positives to it, and sometimes like with the Crusher, for whatever reason, I don't know why I throw that name out, but it was like I just thought, like these certain characters, and Mad Dog Vachon's another one. Like, these guys were such unbelievable characters. They weren't even necessarily great wrestlers. Well, Mad Dog was a great wrestler, but they were just, these larger than life guys on TV that it's whenever I would think about guys like that, it's like Mad Dog Vachon is like, he's like the perfect example of what pro wrestling needs. You know what I mean? These guys that are they're not cookie cutter. They're just freaking, whether they were crazy or not, I believe that they were, and they convinced everyone they were, and they convinced people that they, like the Crusher really was a guy who went out and, danced with 250-pound women to the polka every Friday and Saturday night, and trained running up and down the streets with a keg on his back. I mean, I'm sure it's not true, but he would say it so much that that stuff's just great. I love that kind of stuff, and I think that pro wrestling has completely lost that aspect of it, and those unique personalities, and even like if you watch some of that old stuff, I got some Carolinas tapes from the 70s of house shows, and I'd actually seen it before, but we were just watching it like in the last week, and when you see the crowds and everything and how they react compared to now, it's just like, it looked like so much fun to go to those matches, to watch those matches, and probably to perform in front of those crowds. Because that was the thing, I was watching like Flair and Steamboat, and I'm going like, yeah, they're great, but it's like, it looked like they were having so much fun because everything they did, the crowd just was unglued for everything, and they were also just absolutely fantastic performers. And now it's just, I don't know how to explain it, but it's lost. It's lost something. I mean, it's not like it's bad. It's just, it's different. But there is a thing that it used to be, and I think it's the completely outlandish characters doing their completely goofy interviews that were not prepackaged and not scripted, that really made pro wrestling, way more compelling than this version. And I don't know why it's like, people will say it evolved, and I think it devolved, and it's kind of sad because it's like, if it was better, I mean, and there are aspects that are better, but it's like, if it was really better, then everybody would be talking about how great it was. It's not really better. It's like they've made all these changes, but the changes haven't been for the better, and it's not like, sometimes I used to think that it's like nostalgia for the past, but then when I watch the past, it's like, just a nostalgia. It really just was. It was more heated, and the workers sold so much better, and they were so much tighter in the community, and it was so much of a bigger thing. So it's kind of sad that that's lost.
So, hey Tom, do you kind of concur with Dave there? Because I don't know, I'm in agreement. I agree totally with what Dave said, but I just thought it was me getting older, and I just kind of lost that, this. I don't know how to explain it, but I thought maybe I just got older, and it's just not as interesting to me because I aged. What
are you saying? You lost your smile? Is that what you're trying to get out there?
Yeah, like it wasn't the same as when I was 8 years old and I turned on Saturday night's main event, and Buster Douglas was refereeing a match between Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, and Miss Elizabeth was there.
Yeah, well, it's tough to say. I think if you look at I think you have to look at MMA and pro wrestling as a whole, basically. Right. If you're going to compare it back to, what was going on with professional wrestling in the 80s and 70s, because there has been, a certain amount of people who have been fragmented because of the split between the two products. And I think there are some of those personalities that are out there, maybe not, particularly in pro wrestling, but you look at somebody like a Nate Diaz or a Nick Diaz, who's an absolutely phenomenal character, larger than life, despite their records against top competition. These are guys that people are willing to see their departure from the norm, and I think those people are out there. It just takes a little bit longer to dig deeper and find those personalities. The other aspect as well is, we're living in the information age, really, where you can find out anything you want about somebody to a certain degree, and that kind of molds your opinion of them. It's tough to look at a performer. Let's use George Animal Steel, for example, right? If you take him out of the 1980s, 1970s, and put him into today's world, even if he has the same character where he's, viewed as like a savage, and people are going to be able to find out information on him. They're going to be able to find out that he's, he's a school teacher or whatever the story is. Whereas opposed to 30, 40 years ago, you didn't have that. So I think there's just a disconnect. But I think there are those characters out there. It may be harder to find them. But I think if you look across both sports, mixed martial arts and pro wrestling, that you'll find those guys.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that, because I think that I saw Jerry Jarrett in the 70s brought in, like, Rocky Johnson had been a pro wrestler for years. Right? He's Rock's father. And he was doing, when Ali and Inoki were doing their thing, so this is 76, he was trying to capitalize on it. So he wanted to put Jerry Lawler against a boxer, but he really wanted to be a black pro wrestler. Okay? But so it had to be someone who had never worked in his territory, who could box a little bit, and Rocky Johnson could box a little bit, and they would bring him in as this like number 7 ranked heavyweight in the world, and I saw like the TV stuff, and like the local TV station would go like, here's Rocky Johnson, the number 7 ranked heavyweight in the world, who's going to do a boxer versus wrestler match with Jerry Lawler, and he'd mentioned like, you could never do that now because people would look up the ratings, right? And they would go, hey, wait a minute, Rocky Johnson's been a pro wrestler for the last 10 years, he's just never been here in Memphis before. And so a lot of the lies that they did, or embellished stories, or guys who may have wrestled at the Division I level who became Olympic gold medalists. You know what I'm saying? It's like you really can't do that. Like you can't say like some football player, although WWE did with Jack Swagger, who was a backup. He was a backup lineman at Oklahoma, and Matt Stryker went on and goes, he was a Heisman Trophy candidate. And when he did that, it was just like, God, you can't say that today. You know what I mean? It's like,
especially because it was only like 6 years ago.
You can't do this anymore. What?
And especially because, it was so recent. Hello? Swagger's what, like 31? 32 now, but and I'm guessing that he probably said this 2 years ago. If I'm going to guess when he would do this, yeah. But they undercut his wrestling credentials. They never get that right.
They exaggerated a little bit, but he was a real good college wrestler.
Yeah, he was in that class with Cole Conrad, Cain Velasquez. I think it was 07.
Maybe 05.
Okay.
Maybe 07. No, he was the same. I think he was the same year as Kane, but he maybe Kane took 4th and he took maybe 7th, if I'm something like that.
Yeah, I think that's year Cole Conrad, because he won 2 national.
Cole Conrad won for sure. Whatever year it was, Cole Conrad won. I know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like they kind of downplay Dolph Ziggler's credentials as well.
Yeah, that's right. They never talk about him. His one of the best wrestlers in the history of Kent State.
Yeah, they'll mention it every once in a while, but as far as like using it to prop him up and take him more seriously, I don't think that they use it in that vein, really.
Ever since Jim Ross left, it's become one of the Vince's things that like he kind of like in his love-hate relationship with Jim Ross. I think that like everything Jim Ross represented, they try to get away from. So one of those things was like real sports credentials. So I think that like Jim Ross came from that Bill Watts school where you take guys' sports credentials and then you magnify them. So like Jim Duggan, who was maybe a taxi squad member of the Atlanta Falcons, became a guy who was a Suicide Squad, superstar who got kicked out of the NFL for spearing too many guys, type of thing. That's how they would, or a guy who was, maybe. A starter becomes an All-American. A guy who maybe had a cup of coffee in a training camp becomes, a starter in the NFL. They would again, and you probably couldn't get away with that now, but in those days, that was part of it. But he came from that world, and then he goes to Vince, and then for a while those two got along really well, and then all of a sudden, when they became at odds with each other, it was like everything Jim Ross represented, Vince wanted to go away from.
And Dave. Just to wrap up here, because I know how busy you are, Alberto Del Rio, or Dos Caras Jr., do you think he's in Bellator fighting? We're talking about guys with legit credentials, and he's one of them.
They're talking to him. I don't know. It's a weird thing. The last impression I got is that he's leaning towards fighting. I think at the beginning, he's 37. He wasn't really a great fighter. I mean, he was a very good amateur wrestler way back when he was 20, 21 years old, and then he turned pro, and then he did MMA while he was doing pro wrestling for years and years. And I mean, he was a real guy in the sense that he had 17, 18 fights, and he beat, guys that I've never heard of, and then he lost to guys I have heard of, type of a guy.
Sure.
But I think that there's such a premium. Everybody wants, in MMA and in pro wrestling, everyone sees the Latino population in this country growing, and everyone wants that base because they know it's basically saved boxing. And it's really strong with pro wrestling. And, Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero were so great for it, but Rey's pretty much out, and, Eddie passed away years and years ago. And WWE was looking for it, and they really, wanted Alberto to be that guy. But, Alberto wasn't quite that guy. And in their infinite booking, they absolutely butchered his babyface turn in a manner that was so mind-boggling that, basically killed him before he started, and then they turned him back, and, they kind of neutered him in a lot of ways. But when he left, because of the way he got fired, in the sense of he got fired for standing up for his people. I mean, it's really a great story. I mean, it's real. Like this guy says a racial remark about you, and you go, apologize, no, and you deck him. I mean, like, what Mexican fighting fan isn't going to love a guy who did that and then loses his job over it, right? Well, what a sympathetic character. So I think that the way that he got fired, I think that everybody was kind of looking at him like, he can be that superstar now, in pro wrestling. And then the MMA people who are just desperate for, they're just desperate for, because they all think that MMA is going to be huge with Latin Americans, because wrestling is and boxing is and MMA isn't, but it should be. So they're all looking at like, this could be the guy. But he's 37 years old and everything. But yeah, he's getting like crazy money offers, to fight. So I think, I can't read his mind, but everything that I'm hearing, he's talking to these people. So I think that he's kind of got an open mind to doing it.
Well, there you go, Tom. That might be your guy, Alberto Del Rio, for your comeback.
Well, I hope my comeback's not at Bellator. I was hoping maybe if I was going to fight a Mexican, maybe Brazo de Plata.
Did you ever see him, dude? Did you ever see when he did MMA?
He fought in was it Deep that he fought in?
I think it was Deep. I think it was
they
Deep.
had
and it's funny as it was, he wasn't like you would look at him and you'd just go, oh my God, right? I mean, 5'4" and 350 pounds. He wasn't really like, I mean, he got blown out, but he didn't get blown out like that bad. And I remember people telling me in Mexico, he had a real wrestling background. He just what?
No, go ahead, because I don't know who you guys are talking about.
Oh, we're talking. You know Super Porky?
I've probably seen him, but I don't.
Oh. He's like I said, he's like 5'4", 350-ish, maybe close. And just the fattest, roundest guy. Who does a comedy bit in Mexico. He's been wrestling there for 30 years. I mean, he's really he's been a big time superstar there. And when he was much slimmer, he was a hell of a worker, and he was, he comes from a wrestling background in the sense that every single member of his family is a pro wrestler. I mean,
his son's going to be a big star.
What?
Right. His son is going to end up being a big star. He's getting pushed pretty hard, right?
Which La Máscara or Maximo?
I thought, isn't Psycho Clown?
Psycho Clown? Yeah. That's another one. There's so many members. I'm kind of not positive which brother he's the son of. He's either his son or his nephew. I'm not. I'd have to look it up, but he's definitely from the family. Yeah, but they got the whole, and they got the one. Like I guess La Máscara, who is his son. I mean, it's the craziest thing. So this guy is like the shortest, fattest guy that you've ever seen, comedy figure. And so you think about genetics, and his daughter is like the typical Big Bertha wrestler that there's no one like that now, but back in the old days, the giant fat woman wrestler. So she plays that role. And then this La Máscara just won a freaking bodybuilding contest like 2 or 3 weeks ago or a month ago. And it's like, how the hell? I've always been taught like bodybuilding is all about genetics and drugs, and it's like, I don't know your dad's Super Porky and you're winning a bodybuilding contest. That's freaky.
Oh wow. Okay, that's the perfect point to let you go, Dave. Thanks for your time. I know you got no time because you're doing the Observer all the time and Christmas shopping. I know you were doing that today, but
don't remind me of that.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. It's really an honor. And when I was talking to Tom when he did this, when I was pitching him the idea, he was like as excited as I was to just shoot the shit with you about MMA and pro wrestling.
Well, I wish I could talk more to Tom because we did a show. I think I've only done one show with him, and it was like his knowledge of Japanese pro wrestling, which just made me so happy because it's like even like people who I talk pro wrestling with, I can't really talk Japanese pro wrestling because it's like a foreign subject and everything. But Tom really knows his stuff and everything. Not just pro wrestling, but like New Japan pro wrestling. So that's so cool.
Yeah, I'm kind of upset that Sekimoto and Segura didn't get more love from you. They're in that in the global.
I haven't seen the match yet.
You haven't seen it? Oh
no! In fact, okay. I got a couple. It was about a week or two ago. I had this DVD that says 11-8 Noah, and I think that was the date of their match. And I put it in, but it was the TV show that aired 11-8, not the house show on that day. So I ended up watching like this whole Noah card that was really good. But it didn't have that match, so I have still not seen that match. But I've had people tell me that it's like one of the best matches of the year.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's up there. It's on par with a lot of the stuff from New Japan I've seen. Maybe it doesn't have the same drama due to the fact of the crowd size, but it's a really good match.
Yeah, I'll go watch that tonight.
All right. Well, Tom, you gave Dave some homework there. All right, guys.
The full report.
Like I said, an honor, Dave. And again, WrestlingObserver.com. And just so I don't mess this one up, F4WOnline.com. It's the best $10 or $11 a month you'll ever spend. Tons of audio. You got Brian Alvarez's newsletter. You got the Wrestling Observer. You have the infamous board with all the crazy characters. So Yeah, I've subscribed to it since actually even before you and Brian merged. So
Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
like 07, and I was always aware of you. And then when you came on board, I was like, oh shit, this is great. And I think the price only went up like $2. So I was like, oh, you can't beat this value.
Yeah. That's good value.
All right. Again, thanks a lot, Dave, and